Welcome on this Friday, March the 8th, 2019. It is International Women's Day. Let's not miss it. We will celebrate International Women's Day. And, of course, a lot of women are going to be celebrating it by going to see Captain Marvel. That's one of the ways that the Sun recommends that you celebrate International Women's Day. As you know, it's become a public holiday in Berlin, first region in the European Union to celebrate Women's Day with a public holiday. But, you know, if you're not there, you can still do marches, strikes, to end gender violence and to establish reproductive justice. You know, killing your babies, that's reproductive justice. Body autonomy and freedom of choice. Are they really for freedom of choice? We're going to talk about how Facebook has become the Center for Disease Censorship, the new CDC. Yeah, they're not about choice. They're not about consent. They're not about my body, my decision. No, they're not about that, except to get rid of the kids. Yeah, rip those kids, not just from the mothers, but out of the mothers, rip the babies into pieces. We've got this new thing called Birth Strike. UK women are promoting. I guess that's part of their International Women's Day. Birth Strike. We're going to have a baby ban. We've got to prevent Eco-Armageddon. They can come up with all the new terms that they want. This is the same recycled garbage of population control they've been selling since the 1970s and the first Earth Day. The greatest evil. I remember many of my friends in high school fell for this. Greatest evil is overpopulation. We've got to do it. Well, you know, we've seen how that works out. We saw that in China, the one-child policy, the horrific suffering, the forced abortions, all of the selective abortions, girls abandoned. That's how that worked out. How about that for International Women's Day? You know, we adopted my daughter out of China because of that one-child policy. You have a daughter, you just, get rid of her because you want to. If you can only have one child, that culture, they decided that they wanted to have men. Now, probably the other way here in America, men are hated so much that if they're going to enact a one-child policy here in America, I imagine it'll be the boys that they're aborting, the boys that they are abandoning. But in China, they did it to women. Be careful what you ask for, right? And, of course, I say one way to celebrate the day is to go watch a film directed by and starring a woman. So I guess you can all go see Captain Marvel. I will not be going to see that. I don't think I need to be schooled by Disney on intersectional feminism. If you think that you need a lecture on that, if you find that entertaining, feel free. Go see Captain Marvel, and you'll get your lecture on intersectional feminism and how women are superior to men in every possible way. Two of the women that we're now celebrating, we're going to celebrate them throughout our program day, Omar Ilhan and Rashida Tlaib, even though they represent a philosophy that is decidedly anti-woman, Sharia law, Islam. If you criticize them, of course, you're Islamophobic. The Democrats, as they're being split by the anti-Semitism of the freshman congresswomen, I guess I can't even call them freshmen. They're fresh women, and they got fresh with everybody this last week. As they get fresh, as they start trashing people, you can criticize people, and I believe that we ought to interpret that very broadly. There we are. That was when she won her primary. Yeah, she's an international woman. She's the Palestinian representative in Congress, quite frankly. Don't talk about people who are captured by Israel if you're going to be somebody who is totally captured by Palestine, wrapping yourself in the Palestine flag, ululating with her supporters and so forth. And now they are out there saying, well, if you criticize us, then you are the bigot. Steny Hoyer, the number 2 in the Democrat Party, came back at Bernie Sanders and others. He said, no, this is not about debate. This is about using the same types of anti-Semitic tropes that have been out there. It's about stereotyping. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Oh, yeah, we're going to get into some dangerous area today. I've got some things to say about International Women's Day. I've got some things to say about our new Islamic Congresswomen and what is happening in the Democrat Party. I'm going to talk about David Duke, who loves them. He's out there tweeting all about them. Of course, David Duke has always been a Democrat. He ran as a Democrat. Just like all the people who gave us Jim Crow and the Ku Klux Klan, they're all Democrats. Still are. And they're still out there embracing people. You know, I guess the enemy of my enemy is my friend is his idea out there. So we're going to talk about what's going on with that. And then I'm going to get absolutely, literally transphobic. I'm going to go full transphobic here because I'm very concerned about what's happening to transportation and about the mobility malaise that is being put on us by our government. So we're going to talk about transportation developments. I'm very fearful about how our transportation freedom and mobility are being robbed. But first, it's International Women's Day, as I said at the top of the hour. Today it's now a holiday in Berlin. First time they've had anybody within the European Union make it an actual public holiday. They suggest that you strike and that you march and that you support body autonomy and freedom of choice for all women. Well, you know, not really. They're not about freedom of choice when it comes to medical care, for example. And they're not really supporting women because half the kids that they kill are women, potential women, you know, just young women. We've got the UK now promoting birth strike, saying we've got an eco-Armageddon that is coming up. The founder is a singer in the UK. Never heard of her. Blythe Pepino. Said she moved to create the now 60-member strong community after reading all the fear-mongering from the UN's IPCC. That's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. These are the people within the UN that push the climate change agenda for global governance. That's the purpose of this. It is completely a political movement. These are the people behind the Paris Climate Accord. If they really wanted to address something that they thought was a global issue, as many environmentalists have pointed out, if they really thought that this was a global problem, they would not have given a free pass to China and India to continue to build dirty power plants as they wish, as many as they wish, for several decades. No, this is simply a transference of wealth from one and manufacturing capacity from one area of the world, ours, to India and to China. It doesn't have anything to do with addressing a global problem, whatever you think that is. But here's what she has to say. It is very hard, an emotional message to decide not to have kids. But I hope it might break through the fear and the diffidence that surrounds this subject. I've heard this is nothing new. I've heard people talk about this for 50 years. And it is simply fear-mongering. It has created horrific situations, as I said at the top of the hour, like the the one-child policy in China, the horrific suffering that has caused girls in China. Here, as I said, it'll probably go towards men. But she says she's promoting her polyamorous lifestyle. I have no idea what that is, and I don't want to know. I don't want to get in the details of that. Sounds like something Michael Jackson would do. But polyamorous lifestyles, who knows, who cares about that? But it's not just these people who are pushing this out there, and it's not just the fact that they don't want to have kids. Look, if she doesn't want to have kids, fine, that's her choice. And as the Babylon Bee said, the world breathes a sigh of relief when AOC basically said the same thing. Alexandria in Wonderland said, gee, I don't really even know how we could bring a child into this world. There's so much economic, or not economic, but environmental problems in this world. How could I even bring a child in this? So please don't. We don't want you having any more children. The problem is they want your kids. The problem is you give these people your kids. You hand them over to them in the government school to be indoctrinated in this eco-fear, to become self-loathing, self-hating, to basically be gaslighted into not having kids of their own. This is the real problem. These people who don't want to have kids want to have your kids. And we willingly and foolishly turn the kids over to them. We got some more abortion news that we're going to get into later on, but let's talk, say one more thing here about the International Women's Day. We have Melania and we have Pompeo that are celebrating International Women's Day. And when we look at this, they're going to be bringing international women to tour in the United States. Evidently, we got women from Bangladesh, Burma, Djibouti. I don't even know where that Djibouti. From Egypt, Jordan, Montenegro, Sri Lanka, Peru, Tanzania. Because, you know, we don't have in America any female role models that we could look to. We got to go to international women, and especially women of Iran. You know, they are going to be talking about women of Iran. So fine, there's a lot of women that we could celebrate. Maybe what the Trump administration, Pompeo, ought to do, if they want to celebrate women who have accomplished something, women of courage, maybe President Trump and Secretary of State Pompeo ought to get his sorry ass together and support bringing Asia Bibi out of Pakistan, where they're trying to kill her. A Christian woman who was put on death row for 10 years because she had the audacity in this Islamic country to drink water out of the well when she's working in the field with other people. And they say, you filthy Christian, you've committed blasphemy for drinking water from the well. They kept her on death row for 10 years. One congressman in that country, in Pakistan, who said she should not be executed, had his bodyguard execute him because he was soft on Christians. You want to celebrate somebody internationally? You want to celebrate a woman? You want to celebrate courage? Why don't you start by helping her instead of parading around with this virtue signaling? I am so sick and tired of Republicans who want to become Democrat socialists. They're out there now selling socialism light in many respects, and we'll get into that later in this program. How pathetic that is, as if these people can't defeat themselves. Let's talk a little bit about the DNC bigotry on parade here. We've got the House passing an anti-bigotry resolution because they couldn't pass an anti-Semitism resolution because they would be Islamophobic. They are actually fearful of Islam. They really are Islamophobic, quite frankly. They are scared to death of Ilhan Omar, or Omar Ilhan, whatever. And they're afraid of Omar. They're afraid of Bernie Sanders. They're afraid of all these people. And Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, they're all backing these people to the hilt. Elizabeth Warren said, branding criticism of Israel as automatically anti-Semitic has a chilling effect on our public discourse. Well, I would agree with that, but that's not what this is about. And Steny Hoyer pointed that out. He said, this is not about shutting down debate. Quite frankly, the Democrats don't have any problem shutting down debate. They've been showing that openly, using their partners in social media for quite some time. Just take a look at what they're doing about any discussion of the effects of vaccines. You now have all these news media outlets out there proudly proclaiming that Facebook is going to shut down and censor any discussion that they think is misinformation or hoaxes about vaccines. Seriously? As I said yesterday, we just had the FDA identify several additives to food that they said, according to their studies, cause cancer. But even though they believe they're going to cause cancer, they're going to wait another 16 months before they actually take them off the market because it would be a hardship for the manufacturers. Now, there were multiple studies, and so many people were coming up with problems from vaccines that back in 1986, they did the same thing for them. So now here we are, 33 years, and they've still been giving a pass to the vaccine manufacturers, but they want to step it up. They want to not only give them legal immunity, they want to force us to take their product. Welcome back. We got Bernie Sanders talking about Ilhan Omar. So we will stand by our Muslim brothers and sisters. He said that when she had her first gaffe a couple of weeks ago. Then she continued with that. Then they've been going back and forth about whether they were going to condemn that. You know, it's a dilemma. You know, when I look at the Democrat Party, they remind me of the scene from The Godfather. We have Hyman Roth, who's kind of in control of the games in Florida and in Cuba. You got Michael Corleone there. Remember that scene where he's cutting the cake Okay, these guys, this goes to this crime family, that goes to that crime family. That's the way they see America. Now, how are we going to cut this cake up? And it is a shrinking pie if we have socialism. And of course, Bernie Sanders is going to stand by his Muslim brothers and sisters. A lot of people asked, will they stand by you? Will they stand by you? Because you're a socialist, will they stand by you? I don't know. What if a Jewish congresswoman, first-termer, had said the equivalent about Muslims? Would you have taken her side on that? We have Bernie Sanders again, as they put out this resolution saying we are going to just, taking out the anti-Semitism here. I can't talk about that. We're just going to talk about racism in general. He says we must not equate anti-Semitism with legitimate criticism of the right-wing Netanyahu government in Israel. What I fear is going on in the House now is an effort to target Congresswoman Omar as a way of stifling that debate. Seriously? Well, that's not the way the number 2 in the Democrat Party sees it. Steny Hoyer went on MSNBC Live, House Majority Leader, Steny Hoyer, and he had this to say. Let's play video clip number 6.
We don't want to stifle debate. This is not about debate. This is about stereotypes. This is about language that has been used for a very long period of time to demean and discriminate against Jews and other peoples, because, as you know, the resolution has been broadened. But I disagree with Senator Sanders that this is about free speech and about discussing policies or, frankly, the Netanyahu administration's putting in its coalition a party that has clearly used racist and hate speech. I think that's unfortunate. But having said that, this is not about that. This is not about debate. This is not about policy debates. Every member of Congress, every American citizen has a right and should debate policy differences in an open way without fear of recriminations, except obviously opposition to the idea, perhaps. But I think the senator is not accurate that this has anything to do with any member's right to debate policy and to articulate their positions on policy. It's about doing so. All right,
you get the idea. He's pushing back pretty hard against Bernie Sanders. There is a split that this has caused within the Democrat Party. And it's not even really about supporting debate, because we know the Democrats don't support debate. They have worked very hard to shut down any kind of debate, whether it is in the news media, or whether it is on social media, or whether it is what you have to say on social media. They don't want a debate. And you pick any issue you want to talk about, whether it's foreign policy or whether it is health care. They do not want, or mandatory vaccination. They don't want any debate. No, this is about double standards. That's where I disagree with Steny Hoyer. This is about double standards. And what they have done, and everybody sees it, I think, they have taken the side of the Muslims. Quite frankly, Ilhan Omar sees that. She says she's taken a victory lap, as Breitbart is pointing out. They failed to name her. They watered down the language about anti-Semitism. And in a joint statement, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and Andre Carson, other Muslims in Congress, said, today is historic on many fronts. It's the first time we've ever voted on a resolution condemning anti-Muslim bigotry in our nation's history. So in a response about the anti-Semitic tropes that they were putting out, as he said, the stereotypes, that got watered down, that got turned around, and now they're claiming that this was an this is to push back against anti-Muslim bigotry, not against anti-Jewish bigotry. Omar did not retract, did not apologize for her anti-Semitic comments. She said that any Americans who support Israel are showing allegiance to a foreign country. Well, you know, not everybody that does that is showing allegiance to a foreign. Some Jews are more interested in supporting Israel than they are in America. Quite frankly, I am tired of the people who come here to this country and cut it up like the mafia figures in The Godfather. Hyman Roth. I'm sick of that. And I'm sick of whether they are Palestinian or whether they are coming from another area, whether they're coming from Central or South America, and say that this is, we're going to take this country back, this always belonged to us, or talking about reparations. They're doing this with every single group. This is the policy of the Democrats, to create grievances with everybody, to cut this country up, to put our interests behind that of the globalists or behind that of a particular country. And certainly these new congresswomen are doing that with Palestine. They're guilty of the very same thing that they are accusing others of doing. Absolutely. Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib are guilty of this. There was an Assyrian woman who is a director of special projects with an organization called the Middle East Women's Conference. She was speaking at a press conference. She called on Ilhan Omar to resign. She said she has cousins and family members in Iraq that are called whores by the Muslims there because they show part of the back of their arm. You show part of the back of your arm as a woman, and they call you a whore. Remember, these are the people out there parading about International Women's Day and lifting up Islam, praising Islam as the way of the future here in America. She says, you go to her congressional district, the congressional district that elected Ilhan Omar, she said, you won't even think you're in America. She said, back in Iraq, where they're now calling women whores for showing part of the back of their arm, that was a country where once upon a time they were wearing miniskirts. She said, it truly is because of people like Ilhan Omar. When the government is infiltrated, and it starts this way because it happened in Iraq and it happened against us there. Iraq used to be a country, she said, where Jews lived freely, where Assyrian Christians lived freely, where even Armenians were there, and even moderate Muslims lived until Sharia law took place and everyone was affected. She cited Omar's request to a judge for a lighter sentence for terrorist supporters. She said, we are here because of God to give you a warning as Americans. We're here to tell you this is coming to America. It is already here, and it will affect you, and it will affect everyone. And when we come back, we're going to talk about how Rashida Tlaib said, we always said Muslims are coming, and I think we're here. I think they are too. We need to wake up. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Yeah, it's International Women's Day. Here's a warning for you, all of you who care about your daughters. This woman who is a part of the Middle East Women's Conference said that Islam is coming to America, and it's going to affect all of you. She said she's seen it in Iraq. Women who just show part of their arm are called whores there. Cover up everything. She said, you will see your daughters get beheaded. She said she interviewed hundreds of families of all religions affected by genocide in Iraq who watched family members get executed right in front of them. And that's when reality hit them, and they knew that it was too late, that Sharia law had taken full control of that country. If you don't know, I highly advise you to take a trip to Minnesota's 5th Congressional District, and you will see what is happening. That's the congressional district that elected Ilhan Omar. You won't even think you're in America, she had to say. Well, she says they're coming. Are they coming? Rashida Tlaib agrees with her. She had this to say. Let's run that video clip.
Now the moment you've all been waiting for. Allahu Akbar. The first Palestinian-American Muslim Congresswoman, our dear sister Rashida Tlaib.
Thank you, Hassan. Thank you so much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. You know, we always said the Muslims are coming. Well, guess what? I think we're here.
Yeah,
we're not only everywhere in all kinds of different governments, but mashallah, wow, we're in the United States Congress.
Let's go back to when she first won the primary, the Palestinian primary, because, you know, the most important thing is that she is Palestinian, Muslim, maybe American. You know, American to get into Congress, American enough to get into Congress, evidently. But when she won her primary, remember when she wrapped herself in the Palestinian flag? And this is what it sounded like as they were dancing.
Rashida! 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 I want you to know my mom, who's from a small village in the West Bank, they're literally glued. It's like 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning. And now it's more than that. But they're glued to the TV. My grandmother, my aunts, my uncles in Palestine are sitting by and watching their granddaughter.
There you go. Yeah. Is she loyal to a foreign country, do you think? Is she sentimental about America? Does she love America, apple pie? Does she love our Constitution, our Bill of Rights? Or is she weeping because of all of her family? Her family is all Palestinian. And they're watching the American election in Palestine, and they've now got a Palestinian going to Congress. And she's so overcome with emotion that she's weeping as her supporters are ululating there, whatever that you call that. I tell you what, we need to wake up about what is going on to our country. That woman is absolutely right with Middle Eastern Women's Conference. Pelosi, however, says that new immigrants must not have their votes suppressed. Yeah, that's right. Let's play video clip number 7 if you guys can pull that up. She said, when we talk about newcomers, we have to recognize the constant reinvigoration of America that they are. Just like Rashida Tlaib. These newcomers make America more American. Do they? Do you think so? Is America about what happened? Should we be dominated by people whose concerns are about foreign countries, who get elected to Congress because they've got an agenda to do something in Palestine? Is that why we should have people going to Congress? Should that be their first loyalty to that? Nancy Pelosi evidently thinks so. Here's what she has to say.
But that constant reinvigoration of hope, determination, optimism, courage to make the future better for the next generation, those are American traits. And these newcomers make America more American. And we want them, when they come here, to be fully part of our system. And that means not suppressing the vote of our newcomers to America.
Yeah, they don't even have to come here legally. Let's just bring them in here, get them signed up right away. We just had the second Democrat judge tell us that the census, which exists in the Constitution, the purpose of the census is to allocate representation of American citizens in Congress. And so you would expect that the question would ask, are you an American citizen? How many American citizens of a particular voting age are living in your household? They ask all kinds of other questions now. And they took off that citizenship question about a decade ago. The Trump administration is going to put it on, and you got all these judges who, just like Nancy Pelosi, don't ask that. You shouldn't ask them whether or not they're citizens. We just need to allocate representation based on the number of people that fill this out. See, that is a move to let the sanctuary states dominate politics, even if these people are not voting who come here. If you don't have a citizenship question, then they will count the heads of foreign citizens who are living here, whether they are guest workers and not citizens, or whether they are foreign citizens who are criminally trespassing, otherwise known as illegal aliens. They will be counted, and they will welcome them in with open arms into the sanctuary states of California, Illinois, New York, and so forth, because they want to increase their footprint in Congress, and they can use it that way, even if they don't give them the vote. But of course, as Nancy Pelosi pointed out, they are more American than we are. That's what she said. We have to talk about the newcomers. We have to recognize the constant reinvigoration of America that they represent. These newcomers make America more American. They're more American than we are. They're more American than we are. That's right. I don't do that. I'm not American enough. I'm not part of the new America. Yeah, that's right. That's what Americans do now. We all ululate. That's right. That's real America. That's genuine America. That's a Democrat America. That's the America of the future they want you to have. James Clyburn, the House Democrat whip, one of Nancy Pelosi's top lieutenants, compared the experiences of Ilhan Omar, the Somali refugee, with those of people who had survived the Holocaust. Their experience and the experience of their relative, that accounts for nothing. She is the one who has a genuine experience. Just as Americans are not as American as these new people coming here and cheering, okay, they're more American than we are. And Ilhan Omar is more of a survivor than the Holocaust survivors. He said her experience, Clyburn argued, a report from NDK Network, her experience is much more empirical and powerful than that of people that are generations removed from the Holocaust or from Japanese internment camps and other violent episodes that have marked history. He said, quote, I'm serious about that. There are people who tell me, well, my parents are Holocaust survivors. My parents did this. He said it's more personal with her. I've talked to her. I can tell you she's living through a lot of pain. Living through a lot of pain. She's got a lot of chips on her shoulder, and she is going to make sure that she makes those chips count in Congress. Some Democrats are searching for a primary challenger to Ilhan Omar, but they got a problem because anything that they do to oppose her will be painted as anti-Muslim. And so they truly are Islamophobic. They're already so scared to death of her that they overturned a rule that has always been in Congress that you don't wear a head covering. They did that for her because they're Islamophobic. They fear Islam. And they pointed out that the Republicans are never going to win her district, said one Democrat source. The district is rated as plus 26 for Democrats by Cook Political Reports Partisan Voting Index. That means that the Democrats have a 26% advantage over Republicans. You aren't going to get a Republican to challenge her and win. And the Democrats are scared to death. They said Islamophobia has become the knee-jerk reaction to anyone who dares to criticize her, said a second Democrat to Breitbart News. And of course, what is this district? Well, that's the one where Keith Ellison first got elected. Keith Ellison, who was the first one to refuse to take the oath of office with his hand on the Bible. He demanded that he be given the Quran. He was the former vice chair of the DNC. He is now the attorney general in Minnesota, I believe. I think he ran for that. I think he won that. She is the first Somali American, emphasis on Somali. Yeah. Black Hawk down, folks. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I've got one more bit of fallout from the Democrats dithering on whether or not to condemn the anti-Semitism of Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, or whether they should bow down to them because, you know, they're so afraid of Islam. We've got David Duke now saying that Ilhan Omar is, quote, the most important member of the U.S. Congress. Well, you know, quite frankly, I would agree with him. That might be AOC, but, you know, maybe it is Ilhan Omar. You know, AOC is the socialist side of the Democrats, and Ilhan Omar, and I would also say Rashida Tlaib, but especially Ilhan Omar, they represent the bowing to Islam. And I think those two together represent the future of the Democrat Party. It is a shaky alliance between socialism and Islam. Before we get into that, real quick, I want to tell you what we have at InfoWarsStore.com. Products that will help to support this operation, this program, and to support your health. We have DNA Force Plus. It's something that it's very expensive to put together, so we do them in big batches, and it takes us a while to get these things put together. So we were out of stock for a while. They're now back in stock, and they're now 33% off at InfoWarsStore.com. That is a big dollar savings because, as I said, it's very expensive, very rare ingredients like PQQ, expensive to produce the batches of DNA Force, but very effective in terms of helping you to maintain your health as an anti-aging product. You know, when you look at the telomeres and how they gradually deteriorate over life, anything that you can do to slow that deterioration process, that natural deterioration process down, is very, very effective at helping your overall longevity. We also have some products that will help you to fight any inflammation, especially joint inflammation. Alpha Power and Bod Ease, both of them 50% off. Now, Alpha Power is going to help you with your workouts. Bod Ease is going to help you with inflammation. It's got turmeric and many other natural ingredients that are going to help fight inflammation in your joints, help you with joint mobility, with recovery after exercise. You can now get that 50% off at InfoWarsStore.com, along with storable food products, 50% off. Shelf life of 25 years, non-GMO, made in America, resealable after you open them the first time. You can now get that at 50% off at InfoWarsStore.com. Take a look at the products that we have there, folks. We really do appreciate and need your support. All right, let's talk about David Duke. David Duke, who, as I said earlier in the program, is always run as a Democrat, like all the other KKK Democrats. We had Robert Byrd. He was some kind of a wizard. I don't know. I don't know which kind of, was he a gray wizard, a white wizard, a grand dragon wizard or something? But Robert Byrd, West Virginia, worked for the KKK, and he was celebrated by the Clintons and so forth. All the people in the Democrat Party, this is the uncomfortable truth, they don't like to talk about the Democrat connection to the KKK, the Democrat connection to Jim Crow laws. They certainly don't talk about the KKK and Democrat connection with Southern Poverty Law Center. Morris Dees, I'll point it out again, Morris Dees' only involvement in the civil rights movement. Remember, he's the one who is supposedly, just like the Democrat Party themselves, they are supposedly the antithesis of the KKK. Southern Poverty Law Center has done massive amounts of fundraising, saying they are against the KKK, except that when Morris Dees was a practicing lawyer, he defended the KKK when they attacked the marchers in Birmingham, Alabama, physically attacked them, burned their buses. He represented the KKK. He was paid pretty well. He got what was then the equivalent of a family of four's annual income for that one particular case. But he decided he could make more money if he did direct mail, so he quit after that, and he went into direct mail. He set out the entire civil rights movement of the 1960s. And then he jumped back in with the Carter campaign. He came to them with his direct mail business. He had a business idea. He said, you give me your mailing list, and I'll do fundraising for you. And you don't have to pay me anything. Just give me the mailing list when we're finished. And that became the Southern Poverty Law Center. And now they have hundreds of millions of dollars in offshore accounts. I mean, they're flush with cash. Virtue signaling off of opposition to the KKK when the only thing that their founder, Morris Dees, ever did during the actual civil rights movement when the KKK was a force, the only thing that he ever did was to defend them and make a lot of money off of that. And of course, he made a lot of money then attacking them, which is what the Democrats are now doing. And so when we have David Duke, always running as a Democrat, comes out and praising Ilhan Omar, saying she's the most important member of the U.S. Congress. Well, the question is, when will the mainstream media start to ask these questions of the Democrats? When will they ask them to disavow David Duke? Remember when they attacked President Trump? When are you going to disavow David Duke? David Duke said he liked you. Well, when are you going to, you disavowed him. You said you didn't want to have anything to do with him. President Trump distanced himself from the Reform Party when David Duke started making overtures to them at one point. And so as Duke is tweeting out adoring images of Ilhan Omar, saying she's the most important member of Congress. Of course, he has backed her for several weeks as she went anti-Semitic. Yet we have, when he talks about how he wants to support white people, he doesn't want to support white people, does he? I don't think so. Maybe he's about a kind of Nazi socialism, because he does support Tulsi Gabbard. You know, Tulsi Gabbard, I like her stand against foreign wars, but if you look at Tulsi Gabbard's website, she says, oh, I just love everything that Bernie Sanders has to say. I'm all about that. I'm all about LGBT marriages and all this sort of thing. So David Duke, as he looks at that, we've got an example of how we just are going to determine which group of people are going to be the supremacist. I mean, why can't we have some kind of just equality, just treating people as if they're equal? Why do we have to make women superior to men, or men superior to women, or blacks or whites? We can't have a billboard, for example, in Pennsylvania that says whites have rights. That gets people upset. Remember when you had 4chan say, we're going to go out on Halloween, we can wear masks so they can't see us. We're going to have to wear masks if we go on campus, and we put up posters that say it's okay to be white. Because they knew that it wasn't going to be okay to be white with the universities and with the mainstream media. And it's not okay to say that whites have rights. There's now outrage over that. Yahoo is talking about this. Whites have rights. Outrage over a billboard that says whites have rights. It also talks about the fake attack that was staged by Jussie Smollett. So it had a billboard that had 3 different sections there. One of them just says, whites have rights. Second one says, it kind of rotates through. Second one says, Jussie Smollett hangs himself and sets race relations back 100 years. Is that not true? Maybe the race relations were harmed more by these people in the Democrat Party, all the Democrat candidates calling for reparations. Again, what does it even mean when you say that blacks get reparations? Who's black? Is Barack Obama black? Does he get reparations? He's half black, he's half white. His black father was never a slave in America. He doesn't have any ancestors, black ancestors who were slaves. The white side of his family, I think, did own slaves, but you know, how do we manage that, right? How do we determine who's black and who's white? No, it's simply pure racist demagoguery to divide the country. As a matter of fact, the guy who owns the billboard said, "I'm not racist." He said racism is misunderstood in America. And he says, "I want to have a conversation about it. We need to get over this. I'm black, you're white, you're Hispanic. Who cares? I don't care about that. I do care how you act and how you stand for my flag, for our flag." See, that's the biggest problem. Nobody is talking about Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, who don't really care about this country. They care about Palestine, or they care about Somalia. They don't really care about America. Why isn't that the scandal? Why isn't it that the fact that they put Palestine first or Somalia first before the interests of America, why isn't that the scandal? No, instead, we've got to have this these different groups that are fighting each other. When we come back, we're going to talk about Me Too. Should they have Me Too concerns at the border? You know, we just had a celebrity chef, Mario Batali, who has given up his stake in all of his restaurants, according to the New York Times. He had a 20-year partnership there, very lucrative partnership. Because of accusations of sexual harassment, he gave all that up. And yet you've got Democrats who are encouraging women to make the dangerous crossing of the border when every migrant girl over the age of 10 is getting a pregnancy test, because more than 2/3 of them are. Do you think I'm overstating this? Do you think that this is fear-mongering of Islam? Well, we have the party of Angela Merkel in Germany is saying, actually the head of one of the factions there in Germany, the Merkel party, predicts that they will have a Muslim chancellor by 2030. 2030, that date when the globalist plans have been consummated. They have the UN 2030 agenda. By 2030, they're going to have smart cities. They will have essentially banned private transportation. They will have their 5G network implemented everywhere so that they can track everyone. Every aspect of what you do will be reported to them instantaneously. They'll have a real-time biometric analysis of what you are doing, who you know. Just as we've seen already, 23 million people banned from even getting on the trains. You know, we've got Alexandria in Wonderland wants to ban all private cars and have you taking the trains, even though she can't be bothered to take a 1-minute walk. She spends instead $30,000 during her campaign to take Uber and Lyft rides because it's too much of a trouble for her to get on the subway. But you will be getting on the subway if they're not unhappy with your political affiliation, if you don't say things that they disagree with. And by this utopian 2030, they will have everything in place. Perhaps part of that is, as this guy is talking about that, they will have had their massive replacement of the Western peoples accomplished by then. So the Christian Democratic Union, Brinkhaus said that the party sees opportunities for non-Christians to rise in the ranks. According to Bild, he said in some regions, only a fraction of the population belongs to a church. That's why Muslims who share our values, such as human dignity, personal responsibility, and solidarity, you know, that's what they do when they throw homosexuals off of the roof, right? These same parties who try to put together, they hack together a coalition. They think that they can be they can have Jewish people in their coalition. They can have Palestinians who hate the Jews in their coalition. They can have the LGBT in their coalition. They can have the Muslims who want to throw those people off of the roof in their coalition. No problem, right? The cognitive dissonance of the Democrat Party. They said basic law, they recognize basic law. They're welcome to join our party. Well, just talk about what's going on in Saudi Arabia, for example. I mean, that's one of the best places, one of the best examples of Sharia law. And as I reported yesterday, they've got an app that's been designed by the Saudi kingdom, and they still maintain that app. It's still available on the Apple Store. You can't find InfoWars on the Apple Store. They banned us. But the app that is used to track your women like slaves that was set up by the Saudi king, no problem with that. Tim Cook doesn't have a problem with that. Tim Apple, no problem. And, of course, Google was asked about that, had a dozen lawmakers say, should you be doing this? We've got an American woman who can't get out of Saudi Arabia because her Saudi husband won't let her and her child leave. Using this app, they can enter the Social Security number of any woman under their command. And when the woman gets to a transportation facility or a border crossing, they send an alert to the male guardian saying, are you going to allow this woman to use this transportation? Are you going to allow her to cross the border? And without permission being entered into that app, it's called Absure, they don't go anywhere. And our high-tech minders are just fine with that. And I guess, because they share our values, don't they? Human dignity. How's that for International Women's Day? You like that? You like that app? You like this? They said, well, we're not a religious community, so we're going to embrace Islam. We're not like these people who have abandoned Christianity there in Germany. No. We've moved beyond religion. We're going to embrace Islam now, they said, and Sharia law. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about what's going on with transportation. Got one more article here before we move on to transportation, to Facebook, the new Center for Disease Censorship. Any concerns about healthcare? No. We're going to shut that down. We're going to determine what is truthy and what is a hoax, said Facebook, and we will censor accordingly. No, let's talk about one more Me Too issue. Maybe we should call it, we should set up a hashtag called Yo Tambien. Is that the way you say that? Tambien? Okay, I don't speak Spanish, so I'm getting some help from the crew here. But that's Spanish, close to it. Spanglish, I guess, as close to Me Too as I can get for those who are concerned about that. But there isn't any concern, especially in the Democrat Party, about people making that dangerous journey across the border. Women, children. As Homeland Security pointed out a couple of days ago, every migrant girl over the age of 10 is given a pregnancy test after arriving in the U.S. Not because they limit the rape to girls over 10, but because that's the age at which they might be able to get pregnant. She said, very unfortunately, because of the increase in violence at ICE, we have families with children. We have to give every girl a pregnancy test over 10. This is not a safe journey. They said nearly 1/3 of the women surveyed in 2017 by Doctors Without Borders. That's not ICE. That's not the Border Patrol. That's not the U.S. government. It's Doctors Without Borders. Nearly 1/3 of the women surveyed by them reported being sexually abused during the journey. 68%, 2/3 of those who are migrants and refugee populations said that they were victims of violence of all sorts. New York Times on Wednesday reported sexual assault crisis migrant women are facing, starting with a harrowing tale of a 36-year-old woman who was a mother of 3. She was held as a sex slave in the Texas border town of McAllen while she was drugged and raped for several weeks, going back to the Obama administration, 2014. 36-year-old mother of 3 coming from Guatemala. She crossed the Rio Grande on a raft, and then she was led to a safe house there, the human trafficking there. For weeks in a locked room, the men that she had paid to get her safely across to the United States drugged her with pills and cocaine, refusing even to let her bathe. She said they raped us so many times they didn't see us as human beings anymore. The Times reported on more than 100 documented cases that they'd found through interviews. That's the New York Times. So just take a look at what the New York Times at Doctors Without Borders are saying about this. You know, as we had that case a celebrated case where Time magazine photoshopped the little girl away from her mother. I think it was a girl, as a child, young child, had her crying. They cut her out of the photo. Then they photoshopped her along with President Trump that they cut out of another photo. And they had her looking up at him crying. And you still hear that narrative from Kamala Harris, from all the Democrat candidates. They're ripping children away from their mothers at the border. No, they're photoshopping them for the most part. We don't even know who their parents are. That's why a lot of the children are not just being given pregnancy tests, they're being given DNA tests because we don't know who's trafficking them across. And it's shameful that President Trump had Nancy Pelosi sign, gave him this piece of paper that not only gave local jurisdictions veto power over the wall, but also helped to facilitate this kind of trafficking that they were pushing. But they're encouraging this. How's that for supporting women? It's at a breaking point, said the Customs and Border Patrol. They said 70% of illegals apprehended are from Central America. They said that apprehensions in the month of February were the highest that they've been in over a decade. And yet, most of the mainstream media and all the Democrats are saying, no, it's actually going down. No, it actually is a humanitarian crisis. And yet we have President Trump, when he's talking about the border, is saying we're not doing enough for foreign workers. Lou Dobbs saw that. Lou Dobbs had a big problem with that. Let's play video clip number 9. Lou Dobbs said that Trump's policy is taking a disastrous turn at the border as they are focusing now on importing foreign workers. Let's just go with it, right? For the big corporations who want the workers, the Democrats want the voters, the big corporations that get behind the Republicans want the workers. Here's Lou Dobbs.
The White House could only muster, by the way, 7 corporate CEOs for this big event. In what should have been a reminder to the president's advisors and counselors that in politics as in life, it is important to never forget who your friends are. And if this White House thinks that listening to the beguiling prattle of Tim Cook, Tom Donahue, rhino senators like Susan Collins is helpful to this president, then the battle for the forgotten man and woman in this country will be decided by the very establishment this president ran against. An establishment that spends vast sums of money and energy every single day trying to destroy him and his policies and his historic presidency. That Mr. Trump would advance the interest of the globalist elites ahead of our citizens would be a tragic reversal on any day. But today, on the same day, the Commerce Department reported the United States had the largest trade deficit in our history. The same day, the president of the New York Fed said straightforwardly, economic growth is slowing, that the southern border is being overrun by record numbers of illegal immigrants. It all means the White House has simply lost its way.
Yep.
And that the nation's heart will be, after all, broken by the very same people who brought 50 years of consecutive trade deficit and the export of millions of middle-class jobs and who have fed the swamp for decades. I have a request tonight. Please let your congressman and this White House know what you think about all of this. And please, be very honest with them. I'd make the same request of the advisors and the counselors to this president who in this have served him and the nation so poorly.
That's right. You know, we have to get behind what was important when we voted for President Trump. And we have to tell him to stick to that agenda. This is an amazing reversal. As we've got people out there saying, it's not an emergency. The big emergency is the fact that we'd have the president do something to protect America, to protect the border. We've got to stop that, right? Even have Rand Paul out there saying, we can't vote on this and have this be an emergency. You know, we've got a precedent that we're setting here that's very dangerous. Well, I don't think that it is. I think the dangerous precedent is to say that we can't use the American military to protect our border. Oh, what's going on with this? It is an emergency. It is being overrun. And yet President Trump says we want a lot of people coming in. We want to have the companies grow. And the only way they're going to grow is if we give them workers. And the only way we're going to have workers is to do exactly what we're doing. I think Lou Dobbs is right. I think he has been taken captive by the big banks, the big corporations, if that is what President Trump is saying. And, of course, we have this at the top of the Drudge Report. The news that broke today is that America only created 20,000 new jobs in February. Economists had expected 175,000 non-farm payroll jobs to grow, and yet we only had 20,000. Why is that? Well, we have a story up at Infowars.com. U.S. job cut announcements have risen by 117%. To the highest level that we've seen in more than 3 years. Do we really need to bring in more foreign workers? And we're going to have a situation, I think this is why they have engineered this for 2030. They know that they're going to bring in a lot of metal workers, a lot of robot workers. We are going to have, within the next 10 years, we're going to have more than 50% unemployment projected. The people who are looking at this and how robots are going to be used realize that whether you're talking, regardless of what industry you're talking about, it's going to be across all industries. We've never had any kind of displacement like this in the past. Across every single industry. We've had situations in the past where we've had a massive move away from people working on farms and going into the city. But we haven't had this across every single industry at the same time. And it is going from the bottom, the lowest level jobs, people flipping hamburgers, all the way up to doctors and lawyers. This is something we've never seen before. We're going to have unemployment of about 50%. And when we have these massive numbers of people who have been brought in on the demands of people like Tim Cook, you can expect that these people are going to start fighting each other once we get into something's worse. You think we're fear-mongering when we say that they are replacing us? We have Rashida Tlaib said, they always said the Muslims are coming, and now they're here. And it's not just the Muslims. It's anybody from any foreign country. Anybody but Americans, because they are more American than you are, as Nancy Pelosi said, right? Well, they just had a House vote today. Today, House Democrats voted to defend localities that allow illegal immigrants to vote in their elections. Dan Crenshaw, Texas Republican congressman, said, it sounds like I'm making this up. What kind of government would cancel the vote of its own citizens and replace it with the votes of non-citizens? Well, I'll tell you, Dan, it's the kind of government we've been telling you they've been working towards for a very long time here at InfoWars. We've been telling you this is the globalist agenda, an agenda of people replacement. It's been going on for quite some time. That's the kind of government that would do this. And all the Democrats and most of the leadership of the Republicans are in with this. Not everybody, fortunately. We do have some. Dan needs to understand that it is not a conspiracy theory. It's simply a conspiracy. And you can see it now. It's open. Remember when they used to call us tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists because we said things, crazy things, like they're spying on you with the computer and so forth? Yeah, we knew that. We had NSA whistleblowers who knew that. As a matter of fact, we had congressional hearings back in the 1970s, the Church and the Pike hearing committees. With whatever available technology they had at the time, they knew that they were spying on American citizens, doing it wrongfully. That's why they created the FISA Act and the FISA Court and so forth, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. They created that because you already had the intelligence services spying on American citizens. As soon as they were created, they started doing that. And they said, we don't want you doing that. So we're going to create, we don't want to hamstring you because we want to be able to have foreign intelligence. We just don't want you spying without search warrants on Americans. We don't want to turn the NSA and the CIA loose on Americans. And so what did the establishment intelligence community do? They took the FISA court and they used it like a star chamber against President Trump and against other people. They took the very thing that was meant to constrain them, they turned it upside down, inside out, and used it for their own purposes. And so, yeah, you didn't believe us? We told you it was a conspiracy? It's not a theory. They're now putting it into practice. We have House Democrats voting today to allow illegal immigrants to vote in local elections. If the people say we want foreign citizens to vote in this election, you know, they're going to vote to determine how much money you will be taxed to spend on schools for the foreign citizens who come here because their home countries don't want to educate their kids, so they bring their kids here. They educate them at your expense. They're already doing that in California. They bragged about that. So we want the foreigners who are living here to tell us how much to tax people. And that's one of the reasons why they can't afford to live in San Francisco, is because that kind of insanity. And you're not going to have a house either. You can forget the American dream if you're going to pander to dreamers coming to this country from foreign countries demanding education as a right to be paid for by you. Because most of your property taxes go to paying for education. Representative John Lewis, Democrat from Georgia, had this to say: "We are prepared to open up the political process and let all of the people come in. They're prepared to open up the borders and let all the people who want to come here from whatever country, Central America, South America, China, Russia, Somalia, it doesn't matter. Anybody can come here. They can come here, they can get a free education, they can vote, and they like it that way." They're still technically not able to participate in federal elections. Yeah, right. Yeah. I'm sure that they'll be able to distinguish that. They call this the For the People Act. Well, we told you that they're spying on you with phones, told you they were spying on you with the computers, we told you they were spying on you with social media, but they're also not just interested in the geospatial intelligence, they're also interested in completely controlling the narrative. Purge any information that they don't agree with, that's not part of their narrative, purge that out. They don't want to debate. That's why I said earlier, as the Democrats are trying to figure out what they're going to do about these new Islamic congresswomen who are openly anti-Semitic, Steny Hoyer said, this is not about debate. We're not trying to shut down debate and criticism of the Israeli government. We're trying to stop them from resorting to these racist stereotypes. I said, no, really what it is, it's about upholding a double standard. They're trying to walk that fine line and try not to be seen as having a double standard and seeing which side that they're favoring. But it's also every aspect of the public debate that they want to shut down. They don't want to debate, right? They don't want to debate on politics. They don't want to debate on healthcare. They don't want your consent. And so now Facebook has become the Center for Disease Censorship. We've got mainstream media reporting this. AP News. Social media giant Facebook says it will remove groups and pages that spread misinformation about vaccination on its site. AP is all in on this. They love this idea because they are part of the controlling narrative as well. Establishment media, social media, big social media companies, they are all out there creating a government narrative that they're going to sell to you. And so AP portrays these guys as heroic. It's the latest step, says AP, the latest step Facebook and others are taking to stem the tide of misinformation on social media sites. And of course, they will decide what is misinformation. They will decide what is truthy and what is a hoax. Facebook said on Thursday, it will take its cue from global health organizations. Well, at least they're honest about that, right? This is a globalist agenda, just like opening up the borders, opening up the voting rolls to people from foreign countries. They are also going to open up your veins to have any foreign objects that they want injected into your veins. As I've said before, it's not even about vaccines. It's about the additives. You know, we can distinguish when we talk about we're going to ban food additives. Well, we understand the food itself is not harmful. It's the additives that we're talking about. So have that discussion. Why aren't you concerned about the preservatives that they put in vaccines or about the things that are there designed to irritate your immune system? You shouldn't be worried about formaldehyde and mercury. You're going to be worried about some food coloring. You're worried about red dye number 2, but not about formaldehyde? Seriously? They don't want you to even think about the fact that you have vaccine preservatives and adjuvants. They don't want you to think about the fact that if the vaccines are not stored properly, if they're out of date, they can kill you. We just saw that, as I reported yesterday in Samoa. You had 2 children immediately die after a vaccine. They said, well, they weren't stored properly or they're out of date, so they went after the nurses, not after the vaccine companies, and not after the hospital. They went after the nurses. And so AP says Facebook is taking its cue from global health organizations, from the U.S. Center for Disease Control, and they have publicly identified vaccine hoaxes. The biggest vaccine hoax, folks, is CDC. They are the biggest seller of vaccines. All right, when we come back, I'm going to take some phone calls from you. That number is 877-787-2539. 877-789-2539. It's International Women's Day. Tell us what. Welcome back. If you want to join the program and comment on what we've been talking about, it's International Women's Day. If you want to tell us how excited you are to go see Captain Marvel, or maybe you'll be setting that one out. Maybe you don't want to see a superhero explanation of intersectional feminism. Get a lecture on that. You can tell us about that as well if you want to take the Alita challenge. But anyway, that number is 877-787-2539. 877-789-2539 if you want to join the program. I've got one more thing I want to say, a couple more things I want to say about Facebook and how it is actively bragging about the fact that it is now going to censor any information that they don't agree with about vaccines. You're not going to be allowed to have that discussion. It's just like climate change. Shut up. You're not going to have that discussion. We have said that the science is settled. And so that's it. Well, guess what? Science is never settled. And regardless of what you think about vaccines, aren't you interested in the additives? You know, people are interested in food additives, and we have food additives banned all the time for harmful effects. They do studies on food additives to see if they have harmful effects. They haven't done any studies on vaccine additives to see what their harmful effects are. They just pronounce it fake. You know, we're not going to even look at that. And we're not going to allow you to look at any comments or studies if you know anything about that. So they're very proud of the fact that they're going to shut down any quote-unquote misinformation. Content that contains anything that they label as misinformation will not be shown on Instagram or on hashtag pages. Federal health officials have attributed a recent spike in the number of measles cases to misinformation that has made parents shun the vaccine. I guess they're presumably not going to be concerned about the cases of mumps, for example. They have one vaccine, MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella. They want everybody to take that. And yet we've got more cases of mumps just in the Texas detention centers than we do cases of measles throughout the country. But they're not using that to try to get people to take vaccines, to take the MMR vaccine. Why is that? Well, because that conflicts with their true agenda of open borders. You're not going to be allowed to question that. You're not going to be allowed to know that. And you're not going to be allowed to question the science. They said the number of kids who haven't received vaccines is growing. And the CDC, because they're a government-affiliated organization, will attribute this to a lack of health insurance. Oh, wait a minute. We not only have health insurance subsidies that are provided by stealing money from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac investors. We have health care subsidies for Obamacare that were set up in defiance of Congress. Congress didn't allocate the money. Obama stole the money. And yet all these people, including Republican senators and congressmen who are so worried about the fact that President Trump is declaring an emergency and using the military money to defend the borders, they're very worried about that. Said, you can't do that. Congress didn't allocate the money. They weren't concerned when Obama did that. They weren't concerned when the Obama administration lost a court case. You had both the Congress and the judicial branch say that President Obama could not steal that money to give Obamacare subsidies, and yet he continued to do it. He appealed it and said, well, we're going to continue to do it while we appeal it. President Trump has never done that. It's a shame that he hasn't done that. He ought to say, as Andrew Jackson said, well, the Supreme Court's made their decision. Let's see them enforce it. But we have a situation now where President Trump bows down to every single federal judge. Any federal judge anywhere can veto President Trump's policies. And he immediately steps down. And so now, even though we've got Obamacare and we've got Obamacare subsidies, the CDC says that we don't have enough health insurance. Why are they saying that? Well, because they're trying to push more intrusion into health insurance. They want to ban all private health insurance. They want everything to be controlled by the government. And then they can tell you not only what medicine you must take, but they'll tell you what food you are permitted to eat. You know, things like meat, that's going to be off limits because it's not helpful for you. And it's going to kill you. It's going to kill the planet. So we're going to ban meat. And then another episode here of coordination with the government's narrative, working with mainstream media. This anti-vaxxer son who goes before Congress and saying, my parents didn't get me vaccinated. Shame on them. You should force everybody to get a vaccination. That's also being pulled in. And, of course, the people who are pushing this, little Adam Schiff, who is the guy that purveys all these different hoaxes, is telling everybody that we've got to have, we've got to shut down any information about vaccines. It's the same people who are shutting down information about vaccines that are pushing to mandate vaccines. Isn't that interesting? Isn't it interesting that 15 million Americans have abandoned Facebook in just the last 2 years? Now, to give you an idea of what that represents, it's about 6% of the population above the age of 12 have left Facebook. And the declines are most heavily concentrated in the demographic that they so crave, those people who are aged between 12 and 34. So Zuckerberg is coming out with a new privacy-focused vision for Facebook. As RT says, it's nothing but PR and damage control. They've got a newfound commitment to privacy. They're going to be focused more on, private messaging and things like that. No, when you put somebody in the closet, when you put certain political views or scientific views or medical discussions, when you put those things in the closet, that's not privacy. To have your ideas, your political movements closeted, that is not privacy. The New York Times points out that at CPAC, just last year, Google and Facebook were all over the place. Google was hosting big private parties, giving people free food, free drinks. Facebook had a help desk. Now they've got, you get the back of their hand. And they said last week at CPAC, Silicon Valley's only obvious presence was on the lips of exercised right-wing critics who whipped up the crowd by denouncing the American tech industry as an authoritarian hegemony, intent on censoring their cause. Well, of course that's the case. They are a technological authoritarian hegemony. It is authoritarianism. It is censorship. It is, and I'll tell you again, what they were working on, going back, look at the last 2 years, why 15 million people have left. It's because they have weaponized high tech. Going back again to the November 2017 Senate Judiciary Committee, Clint Watts laid it out for everybody. He said, America's war with itself has already begun. We all must act now on the social media battlefield to quell information rebellion. See, that's what they see this as. You disagree with them, this is an information rebellion. It is a civil war, and their response is going to be censorship. It's going to be deplatforming. It is going to be banning of individuals like Alex Jones, like Tommy Robinson. Anybody that doesn't agree with what they have to say, they're going to shut them down and silence them. He went on to say, stopping the false information artillery barrage, and of course that's any information they disagree with, is false. So stopping that artillery barrage of information that is landing on social media users comes only when those outlets distributing bogus stories are silenced. If we silence the guns, the barrage will end. It is a war. It is a civil war. It has already begun, and the first casualty of war is free speech and the truth. All right, we've got just a little bit over a minute left, so we're going to go to the calls when we come back. Again, if you want to call in and tell us what you're thinking about on this International Women's Day, March the 8th, 2019. The number is 877-789-2539. That's 877-789-2539. We're going to take calls on anything that you want to talk about, but I'd particularly like to know what you think about the Democrats now fighting with themselves. You've got these different factions that they've created based along sexual lines, based along sexual orientation lines. I mean, you look at even at the LGBT movement, you've got the L's fighting the T's. You've got within the Democrat Party now, you've got the Jews fighting the Muslims. But they want to get everybody fighting amongst themselves in America. They want a civil war. And they are going to censor, they're going to deplatform. They don't want people to come together. They want to break everybody into different competing groups. And they're doing a pretty good job of it. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've got a lot of callers that have queued up on the board. We've got Jason, Jerome, Ken, Dennis, Juan, Kirk, and many others. So hang on. We're going to get to you in just 1 second. Before we do, real quickly, I want to tell you about some of the specials we've got at InfoWarsStore.com, because you can, it's a great time to take advantage of those specials so that you can help your family's health, help your health, and also help us as we fight this information war. I just told you, they want to silence anybody that opposes their agenda. They've got a narrative that they've got out there, whether it's vaccines or climate or any kind of political legislation. They don't want anyone who is going to oppose what they have to say. They want everybody saying the same thing. And I grew up in a time when that was the case. 3 networks, they all talked about the same topics every single night. They all approached it from the same angle. They want that kind of consolidated narrative again, and they are doing everything they can to shut that down. So if you don't want that to happen, it's a good opportunity for you to take advantage of the specials we've got. You can also, again, help yourself. It's a win-win proposition. As Alex Jones says, it's a 360 win. Everybody all the way around wins with this. Here's some of the specials we got going right now at InfoWarsStore.com. We've got DNA Force Plus that is finally back in stock, and it is now 33% off. That is a big dollar savings for DNA Force. A great supplement that we have. I always take DNA Force. Very important. Do your research. You can still look that up, make your own decisions on some of these things. While the government will allow you to make those decisions, take a look, do your own research. We've also got InfoWars Select Storable Food Products up to 50% off. These are products that have a shelf life of 25 years, made in the USA, non-GMO. You can reseal them after you open them up. It's a great time to buy in on products to fix that price. 50% off at InfoWarsStore.com. We have Bod Ease, the ultimate turmeric formula. It's got turmeric and many other ingredients to support your joints and your mobility, your flexibility, to decrease inflammation, also to support your immune system. All these things come from these natural ingredients. You know, natural ingredients can be very, very powerful. And turmeric is one of those. And Bod Ease has not just turmeric, but many other ingredients. Again, take a look. We've got the ingredients listed there at the site. Do your own research, and you can save 50% off right now with Bod Ease. All right, let's go to some of our callers. Let's go. Looks like the first person on the list is Jason in Florida. Thank you for joining us, Jason. Go ahead.
Always a pleasure talking to you, David. First off, you know, all respect and utmost thank you to everyone that supports InfoWars and the InfoWars store.
Yes.
One thing I do want to mention is not only the great sales, David, but let's not forget about the Patriot Point system.
Yeah,
I mean, Alex
right.
couldn't continue giving back more than he already does, and the 360 win scenario is just absolutely fantastic.
That's right. The Patriot Point system is a way that you can get points for your purchases, and you can use those in the future for further discounts off of products.
I myself, I wear all the T-shirts. I have every single one since the beginning. I've been a fan of InfoWars and Alex Jones since 1997.
Wow.
When I listened to him on shortwave radio when I was stationed in Fort Bliss, Texas.
Wow.
So that's how long I've been around.
Well, thank you, Jason. Appreciate that. Thank you.
And I appreciate you as well, David. Congratulations. I mean, you're giving the long haul. First the David Knight show in the morning, and then coming in on the Alex Jones show, David. Again, hats off to you, sir. I don't know how you're doing it, but something you're doing right, my friend. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Well, what I want to talk about, David, is if you notice real closely, you've got all these, I don't want to call them anti-Semitic, but they're definitely, race and religion aspects being pointed out by numerous members of the Democratic Party, and we all sit and talk about how it's a division within the Democratic Party. My friend, I don't see it as much a division as I do a strategy. Now, hear me out. The strategy is if we can get the Republicans to propose a bill that'll get now I'm thinking as a Democrat, a bill that would get the Republicans to come out and vote against these individuals in the Democratic Party that are making these statements, then we have actually given cause to the narrative that the Democrats have been talking about for years. The anti-Islamic Republicans, the racist Republicans, the anti-women Republicans, because every Republican is going to get on board with a vote that says we can't speak like this.
Yeah, I just think that they've overplayed that hand so much, to the extent that every time they disagree with you on anything, they haven't wanted to debate. They said, oh, this is about a debate. You know, you should be able to criticize Israel. And it's like, no, they don't want any criticism. Whenever you get in the streets with them, or whenever you get on to even a program with them, if they disagree with you, they immediately call you a racist, a sexist, a Islamophobic, homophobic. You know, they just throw those labels at people rather than debating the topic. And so it's totally disingenuous, and I think the American people see that they don't want any debate. And
not only that they don't debate, David, but then they redefine the terms. Now, I did a video, if I could plug real quick, on brighttheon.com. My channel is only, the word only, the number 4, and America. I did a great video about the changing definitions and hate crimes here in the United States and ways that we can actually fight against this. And I'll tell you right now, I think they're really trying, David, again, I think they're trying to get us to come, not us, I mean representatives of us, the people in the Republican Party. I think they want to get us on record voting against these things, because then the media can spin the narrative of, look how many Democrats don't like women. Look how many Republicans don't like women. Look how many Republicans don't support these individuals. They've learned that if they infiltrate us at the highest level, which is our governing bodies, that, you know, and that was all done under Obama, as we all know. The majority of these individuals come from areas that, you know, gerrymandering and all that and redistricting. They set all this up under Obama, and they did it on purpose. The next play, David, in my personal opinion, is going to be to get this to come to a vote, so that they have hard evidence when the next 2020 comes up. They know Trump's going to pull 2020, but they can stop us from holding these positions in not only the Senate, but also in Congress, by forcing this to a vote and then pointing that racist, you know, all these words, these terms they like to use. They can actually point to us and say it. And the general population, David, is so dumbed down. They'll actually take these sound bites and think to themselves, oh, look, there's proof. They voted against that African-American female who just happens to be of Muslim religion.
Yeah, I think that you're right in terms of labels. I think they've been masters at using labels in the past, but I think they're starting to, they've been so successful about that. I think that they are starting to get a little bit too confident. You know, they were able to take terms like liberal, going back to the turn of the 20th century. Liberal meant somebody who supported freedom, who supported liberty. And then they were able to take that and make that the label for the left. Also bring in the term progressive. They were able to fool people with those types of labels, but now they're out there foolishly embracing socialism. And the only way that that works is when you've got people who are totally ignorant, like the people that have been educated in the last couple of generations through the government school systems. They have been trained and indoctrinated to either not know what socialism is, not to know history, or to think that that's a good thing. And I think that they're starting to use these, they have become so dumbed down and so focused on labeling that they're just throwing these labels out without any substance to that. And so I think, you know, they've kind of cried wolf so much on racism, sexism, all these different labels. Like I said, they don't really want to debate things. I don't think they know how to debate anymore. And I think Americans are starting to see through that. But we'll see. I mean, it's going to be a difficult situation, because even though, you know, this is a very weak strategy, it can work if people have been deliberately dumbed down. And that's really what our education system has been focused on. Thank you so much, Jason. I've got a lot of people on the line, so I want to start moving through this. Let's go to Jerome in New York. Thank you for holding, Jerome. Go ahead.
How are you, David? You doing all right today?
Doing good. Thank you.
Say, God, I wish you guys would come on a little bit earlier, man. Here in New York, man, I have to wait till 9 o'clock so I can see the decent news, man. All it's on is
well, I've got a program that starts before this program, so I get on 3 hours before that. So
yeah, I know.
Oh, 9 o'clock. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish y'all would come on about 7 or so. But anyway, hey, I want to pass this along to you. For some reason, yesterday I get up and some wild idea. I typed in Laredo webcam, Laredo, Texas border webcam. And there wasn't really nothing happening there, so I saw another little sign that said Juarez Lincoln Bridge, Mexico side. So I typed it in. I looked, boom, over in the right-hand lane. There's 4 buses sitting there, and there's a few cars. This is like 5:30 in the morning. You know, I start watching it, and the thing about it is, You know, the way the webcam is set up, it's like it updates every 60 seconds. It cycles every 60 seconds. So to get an accurate count of how many buses actually there is not easy. So what I did was
Which side of the border were these buses on? Were they on the American side or the Mexican side?
No, that's on the Mexico side, waiting to come in. And I kept watching it. You know, I kept watching. I've been watching it all day too. I've been watching this since 5:30 Central Time this morning, 4:30 here, and there's buses already lined up. Right now, there's no buses there, but I want you guys out there listening to the show to type it in and check it out.
Wow. I guess that's what the Democrats mean when they talk about public transportation. Welcome back. We're taking callers. If you want to join the program, the number is 877-789-2539. We're going to have Gabe Hoffman, who is the producer behind An Open Secret. He's going to be joining us at the bottom of the hour. But for the next half hour, we're going to be taking your phone calls. Let's go right now to Juan in Florida. Thank you for holding. Juan, go ahead.
Thank you, David. We just want to say thank you for all that you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I buy all the Alex Jones products. I've been a listener around 97 also, like my brother was saying.
Wow.
But look, I just want to tell you that the most important thing is water, protect the water. I'm in Royal Palm Beach and protect the air that you breathe. I'm in the process of buying a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. Look into that, brother.
Okay.
But look, I was military intel, Navy, but right now I'm going to read to you real quick. It was by William Kelly, official Palm Beach exempt from 5G wireless law. It was posted May 3, 2017 at 12 a.m., and then it was upgraded on May 3rd on 4/29. Very important. You need to know that Donald Trump is exempt, so are the elites. People need to look into this because the 5G is a diabolical weapon at the highest level.
I agree. I agree.
Yes.
It's a diabolical weapon both against our liberty and against our health. I agree.
Yes, it's mind control. Remember, that's what the enemy has wanted from the Christian, from the humanity, from the beginning. Mm-hmm. Now, the Israelis are exempt. You can look into that. It's the Palm Beach Daily. There's another girl here who is, her name is, you can find her on YouTube, Cindy Garraway. She published it in July 14, 2017. I'm bringing the 5G. It was built by Israel, and it is being used. They don't use it there. They're exempt, so is the elite and Donald Trump. I think he's here this weekend, and I'm planning to go over there and let him know so he doesn't come with any excuse and say, "Oh, I didn't know about this." You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Did they say in this paper or this article, did they say why they were opposed to 5G?
Oh, yeah. It's here. Town manager Tom Bradford said Tuesday that Palm Beach and some other coastal communities have been exempted from legislation that would limit local control on the installation of 5G transmission equipment.
So you're saying it's been exempted?
No, yeah. That's what I'm trying to tell you guys. So we have the right given us to us by God in the Constitution to protect our life and the freedom of liberty.
I agree.
And so people need to get to find out where the elites live, you know, like the governors and senators, and find out it's 5 years also there so they can make this go viral and let the world know that these people are a bunch of hypocrites. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, back in the Clinton administration, Bill Clinton's administration, 1996, they passed the Telecommunications Act. And they said at that time that that act was supposed to trump the concern of any localities, any state and local concerns that would restrict the location of cell phone towers were going to be shut down if you wanted to restrict their location based on health concerns. Now, if you were concerned that it was going to be ugly and it's going to hurt your property values, they'd listen to you because I guess they figured they could dress it up or whatever. But you weren't going to be able to raise health objections to any of these cell phone towers. And so it's something that we need to push back against. That's a bad piece of legislation. And if you're pointing out that they're giving themselves exemption in West Palm Beach and other places where you've got a lot of elitists there because they know how dangerous this is. Look, we've already had some studies about 5G itself, but there were tremendous number of studies that took place immediately before and immediately after the 1996 Telecommunications Act, showing that it increased cancer. If you were close to these cell phone towers, it increased cancer by anywhere from 3 to 8 times, depending on the different types of cancer. And they didn't care. And we've had a study that was in 2016. They did it on rats, showed increased effects and tumors on the hearts and minds, quite literally the brains and the hearts of rats, predominantly male. And they said, we don't care. We're going to move on with this. We're not going to do the human studies. We're going to continue on with this. You're going to have an antenna that's every 50 feet. It's going to be very high in frequency. And so it's qualitatively much more dangerous. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm David Knight in for Alex Jones on this Friday, March 18th, 2019. We're taking phone calls. Let's go to the phone calls because I've got a lot of these to get through before we get to our guest. At the bottom of the hour, we're going to have Gabe Hoffman joining us. He was a producer for An Open Secret, talking about the sexual shenanigans in Hollywood. And, of course, there's been a lot of that continuing in the news. I don't think it's ever going to stop, but with Michael Jackson and others, but also some new revelations have come to light about politicians, religious leaders, people in Hollywood especially. So Gabe's going to be joining us at the bottom of the hour. Let's go to Dennis in Virginia. Thank you for holding, Dennis. Go ahead.
Hey, David, thanks for taking my call. I just want to jump back to the vaccination issue there. I spent over 29 years in the Army, and I don't know how many shots I've taken, throughout the course of being in the military. And, up until a few years ago, they finally passed laws that they could not experiment on our military anymore. I mean, why is it they're always experimenting? You can go back. I mean, if these vaccinations work, why are they always experimenting on different populations? They'll go to inner cities and give them these free shots.
Oh, yeah.
They'll go to Africa and a lot of these villages and give them all kinds of shots. If the death rate gets too high, they pull out. But if these shots work, these vaccinations work, why are they always experimenting?
Well, I guess the other question is, if the vaccines work, why are they concerned about what I do or not, right? I mean, if their vaccines work, then you shouldn't be concerned whether or not I or my family take these vaccines. And it's another issue where we need to be able to separate the vaccines from the vaccine additives, just like we do with food and food additives. All of that should be open for discussion. The fact that they are trying so hard to shut this down at the same time that they're pushing mandatory vaccines. I mean, wouldn't you expect that if they're going to mandate vaccines, that we would have a debate? Of course, the Democrats tell us that they want to debate when it comes to Israel, but they don't want to debate when it comes to vaccines or anything else. They say, well, we want to open this up for debate. We don't want to shut that down. They do want to shut down anything that they don't agree with. Now, when we talk about human experimentation, especially in the military, it's interesting you would bring this up, Dennis, because I've been listening to a book about Operation Paperclip, very good book by Annie Jacobson. I would suggest that to anybody who really wants to get a feel for how we have lost our way in this country. After World War II, we decided that, we weren't going to push them for reparations, that perhaps that push after World War I was what brought us into the conflict again. Pushing them down, taking away their economy and so forth. Perhaps that had a factor to do, was a factor in that. But still, as we looked at that, they decided they were going to get something for their trouble, and that was going to be technology. So we brought in all of the rocket scientists, but we also brought in, and of course, when we look at the rocket scientists, I'm not really willing to give Wernher von Braun a pass on all this stuff when he was dropping V2 rockets, when he was using slave labor to manufacture these V2 rockets, the kind of the things that he was doing to manufacture this, and it was a big push, was just as bad as anything that you would see in any of the concentration camps. I mean, they're putting these people in digging underground military bases with their bare hands because they were so afraid that if they gave them tools like axes and picks that they would use it against them. So the types of things that Wernher von Braun and his crew were doing to get those built, the slave labor, people would go in, they wouldn't give them any medical treatment, they were not coming out. It's the worst conditions you could ever imagine. But we decided that we wanted this technology, and it wasn't just a rocket technology, it was also chemical weapons, and it was biological weapons. We brought these scientists in. That was going to be our payback for the war. It was going to be technology and information. It was based on human experimentation. And once we brought in those scientists along with the data, then we started to regard that, I think, as something that was fine for us to do. And we've had numerous reports, most of them kind of quiet, about human experimentation. We have sometimes that it comes out like Tuskegee. But that's just one of many, many examples that have surfaced. But we're talking about human experimentation. Just look at 5G. They're going to roll this out, expose everybody to this, and many scientists who have looked at this said we are embarking on the biggest human experiment we ever have embarked on, and we are doing it without proper vetting. I think that they do know what this is going to do to people. I think, as I said, we had a study back in 2016. I don't think that there's any question that this is going to have adverse effects on a lot of people. We've already seen people who are in close proximity to this. If you hold up the cell phone, even though that's a low signal level, you hold that cell phone up to your head all the time. We've already seen people getting brain tumors. Well, you're going to be exposed to 5G everywhere all the time because they're going to be putting these antennas about every 50 feet because they are such a high frequency. They don't have transmission unless they are line of sight. So we have human experimentation that's going on all the time. The question is, when are the people going to have enough of this, Dennis? You're still there? Okay, I think we lost Dennis.
David.
Okay.
It's
sorry, I went on this long rant and I put you to sleep there. Go ahead.
Hey, it's good stuff. I watch you guys every day. I love it. You know, I couldn't live without your show. I tell you, and Alex and Owen. I mean, you guys are like my dog. Sometimes my dog couldn't live without. I mean, I'm serious. I watch you guys every day.
Well,
in fact, I can't get anything done in my house. I mean, I turn you on in the mornings, and it's like, you know, and I'm not going to watch them today. I get the stuff done, but I end up watching you all day.
Well, just listen as you're working. You'll be able to get something done.
But David, thanks for taking my call, man. And I'm glad you're back, and everything's great with you. And you know, we pray for you.
Thank you.
For you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing that. That's very, very important. I really did appreciate it. I was very touched by people praying. Some of the people the day I was having the operation called into the show that Owen was hosting and prayed for me. I was very touched by that, and I do believe that makes a big difference. Let's go to Ken in Missouri. Thank you for holding, Ken. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hey, Ken.
Yeah.
Hey, go ahead.
How you doing?
Doing good.
Hey, they must have misunderstood me. I'm in Florida.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
All right. That's all right. Hey, you know that phrase, learn to code? I got an idea from it.
Okay.
You know, if us conservatives got together and wrote our own operational code so we wouldn't have to ask permission to communicate, don't you think that'd be helpful?
Yeah, it would. And, you know, we do have several different video sites and several different social media sites. It's just an issue of getting critical mass. You know, you look at YouTube, you look at Facebook. You know, I look at Facebook and I look at Mark Zuckerberg. You know, this guy is not a genius. You know, he is a made man. You know that he was subsidized. And if you go back and you look at how these guys got into the position of where they are, they were able to operate, get there early on and get a foothold because they were promoted by the overall system. It isn't like Facebook is such a great interface. Quite frankly, I've never liked Facebook. I haven't been on it in over a decade. I tried it out as an individual and I didn't like it, and I certainly don't like what they're doing now with the information that they get. But they were supported by the deep state. As the internet became feasible, you had all these different venture capital firms that were created to help Facebook, to help Google get in power. They worked with the people that were going to be working with them, the same way that we see the situation going on in China now. You work with the Chinese, they'll work with you. If you don't, they're going to exclude you from being able to do business. They will subsidize people. Facebook used to get a lot of money from the Atlantic Council. They're now paying dividends back to the Atlantic Council, giving them contributions. Of course, Atlantic Council is pushing globalist interventionist wars for regime change and so forth. It's kind of a think tank for NATO. They are connected to these different organizations. They've been helped by them. The buzz that was created around them has been very helpful. You look at alternatively something like Gab, where they say, well, we're going to just be all about free speech. What happens to them? Not only do they get attacked as being racist, as being fringe, but they also get attempts made by banks to try to defund them, to deplatform them, to say that we're not going to deal with you. We're not going to take payments. Same thing happening to us. So it's a real uphill struggle. It's not just having the ability to be able to put code through. Yeah, you can put that up there. It's also though trying to get that out there and swim upstream against the establishment, both the media establishment as well as the banking establishment, trying to shut people down. All right, stay with us. We'll be right back with more of your calls. Welcome back. We're taking calls. I'm going to jump into this as quickly as possible because we got Gabe Hoffman joining us in the next segment. Let's go right away to Bruce in Texas. Go ahead, Bruce.
Hey, good afternoon, David. Thank you for taking my call.
Well, thank you for waiting.
I listen to you whenever I can catch your show, and we enjoy the heck out of the all the products that you offer at InfoWars.
Great, thank you.
I'm sorry I missed your show on CPAPs with modems. I'm a longtime CPAP user, about 15 plus years, and for all those years that I was employed, I retired as an engineer last December after 41 years. The insurance companies bought replacement parts and commodities every 3 months, no question asked. I retire, I'm on Medicare. I go for my first set of replacements last month, and Medicare demands to see the chip in my CPAP for a compliance assessment. I said, compliance? What's the contract? What are the terms? Worse yet, what happens if I'm non-compliant?
Yeah.
You take the right 90-day window in my life, and I'm spending 2 weeks backpacking in the mountains. No CPAP.
Wow.
And so it really irritated me that they were looking at that and monitoring every minutia of my CPAP use.
And see, that's what we're always going to see when we've got, when the government helps you with something like that, they take control. And before you know it, they're dictating particular terms to you. That's the real danger with any government assistance on healthcare. They're going to start dictating the terms of it, and they're going to start using that to intrude into our lives in any number of ways and arbitrarily setting up boundaries for what we can and cannot do. They're going to even intrude themselves into what we can and cannot eat. That's an absolute given. Once they start providing health care to everybody, they're going to tell us how much sugar we can have. They're going to tell us whether or not we can have meat, and on and on and on, because, of course, they're paying for it. If they're paying for it, they're going to define it. We've already seen this happen with education. Education's a great thing. I'm not a big fan of schools, however, because of what they do when they get control. You never know what these people are going to do, and they come up with some pretty crazy issues. So are they now telling you that if you don't have a monitoring chip, or they're not happy with the activity that you're doing? How are they using this precisely against you?
Well, I'm not sure yet. I haven't heard back from them. I've had that chip and that machine for 6 years now, and no one has ever asked to see my sleep patterns or any of the data on it. But now they're looking at it. But I'm concerned, well, what will they do if I'm not compliant in their mind?
Yeah.
They count the number of days you use it for 4 more hours, the number of days you use it total, and computing percentages. So what's compliant? And I read about the modem CPAP, and that really scares me when they can change the settings on the fly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't want them controlling my car, let alone my medical devices by remote control. Hey, even if it is nothing malicious, let's just say that they do a software update. They don't always get those right? I mean, how many people have upgraded their cell phones and find out that a whole bunch of stuff has been broken? I just had so much stuff broken on my latest upgrade with Apple, I've completely abandoned the Apple iPhone. I'm gone to an Android platform. And so, it's that type of thing. When they upgrade stuff like that and do it over the wire, you never know what they're going to do. Yeah, that's a real concern.
And also wanted to mention that you had mentioned the adverse reaction your wife had to gabapentin.
Yeah.
My girlfriend had the same reaction.
Did she? Yeah. Yeah. The doctors always say, I've never heard of that before. And it's like, well, you should go to some of the sites that I've gone to. I've got 1,000 people talking about adverse reactions that they'd had over that thing. I was absolutely astounded when I found it. The simple fact of the matter is that, these drugs are very intense. They're concentrated. And not everybody's going to have that reaction. Look, there's some people that liked it. And that's the whole thing behind risk, right? All we can do is say, this is what we know at this given moment. Fully inform patients. Let them make up their minds as to what they want to do. But you be honest with them. Give them full disclosure, because not everybody's going to have the same reaction. That's what we're seeing going on with vaccines as well. I'm absolutely certain of that. But even when you have a situation where somebody has an adverse reaction to a vaccine, you have a doctor that's being threatened in California with his license because a child who'd had an adverse reaction to a vaccine before, he goes to the doctor and the doctor says, all right, well, we're going to exempt you from vaccines. And so they hammer that doctor because he exempted that person who had an adverse reaction. It's not going to happen to everybody. It's just an issue of risk, and we need to be informed of what those risks are. Absolutely.
Yeah, but for fun, have you ever had a challenge discussion with a doctor about the possible side effects to find out how little they know about it for any drug?
Yeah, they're not concerned. I talked to my doctor about that. And, you know, as soon as I bring up a side effect, he goes, oh, you've been talking to Dr. Google, haven't you? You know, that kind of condescending attitude. And I just bit my tongue. I didn't say, well, one of us needs to take a look at some of the studies and some of the side effects. If you're not interested, I am, because it's my health and we need to take control of our own health. And if we let the government subsidize this and take it over as they are working so hard to do, then we won't have that choice. And I think right now, the tip of that spear is the vaccine mandates that they're ready to shove down our throats. And they're going to work with Facebook to shut down any information that would have people be concerned about that. I mean, they really want to take our freedom. They want to take our health, and they aren't interested in what we have to say. Thank you. We're going to move along, Bruce, because I've got a lot of people holding here, and I've only got this segment. Let's go to Michelle in California. Thank you for holding, David. Michelle. Hi.
Hi. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for holding.
So I wanted to bring up a topic I never really hear anybody talk about, and that is the white slavery that was in this country before black slavery ever got here. Mm-hmm. When we're talking about the Atlantic slave trade, it started with the Irish, the English, and the Scottish for a number of different reasons. I won't go into all of that. One place that they were brought to was Barbados, and they were thrown out into the fields, and they were just scorched by the sun, the heat. They did not fare well in Barbados and hot countries. And, of course, one of the names, it evolved from another name, and I can't remember the name right now, but it comes, the redneck is white slave that came from that region. Mm-hmm. That's because they were so burnt on the back of their legs and their necks that they gave them names for this. So as we come into America, several years before blacks became slaves here, blacks were free, blacks owned white slaves. So it kind of went like this. You had whites who owned black slaves, Native Americans, and whites. You had whites who owned whites, blacks, and Native Americans who owned whites, blacks, and Native Americans. So I think we need to push back on this whole black agenda. I'm so sick and tired of hearing about poor me, I'm a victim. You don't hear the Irish or the Scots talking about it. So how about we start something that pushes, hey, this is true history over here. Let's educate the public, because I'm sick and tired of hearing about the victimhood of
I think we need to ask some really tough questions of these Democrats who are out there demagoguing about reparations. Ask them who's white and who's black. Have them go back and look at the history of the guy who wrote Amazing Grace. You know, he was a slave trader, but at one point in time, he was enslaved by the black people. He had a shipwreck. They got a hold of him, and he was a slave of blacks. Everybody has had slaves at one point. Welcome back. We're going to be talking to Gabe Hoffman in just a moment. Again, he is the producer of An Open Secret. While we're waiting to get him on the line, let's go to some of the calls that we have. I think we've got Paul in Vegas still on the line. Go ahead, Paul. Thank you for holding. Hello, Paul. You there?
Hello.
Hey, Paul. How you doing? Thanks for holding. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was praying for you when you had your surgery and stuff.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and you was talking earlier about the Democrats. They're never going to stop their obstructionist agenda because they're jealous of President Trump's success. It's like if your ex goes off with a better guy or whatever, and you see her later on and she's real happy, and you're like, it's a sort of a hatred that they just keep manifesting over and over.
Oh, yeah, I agree with you. I think it's even more than just jealousy of his success. I mean, they want power. That's just that. I mean, that's all it is. When you look at socialism, they want to be able to control everything. They want to be able to control your life. They want to be able to plan your life. They want central control and central planning. That is the essence of socialism. And these are people who will do anything to get political power. It's what makes them so dangerous. That's why we don't want them to have it. And so, yeah, they don't like the fact that the Republicans or President Trump have it. They'll do anything to get it, and it doesn't matter what happens to this country. That's going to be the agenda that they pursue. And I just wish we could get more people on both sides of the aisle that are more concerned about the things that affect each and every one of us rather than their own political careers. Because quite frankly, I'm really getting tired of both sides of this back and forth, this political wrangling that's up there when both sides are basically urinating on the Bill of Rights. They don't care about our individual liberties. And I think it's pretty apparent by now that there's not anybody there that really does.
Right. I have some solutions for some of the things like the border. We need to put solar panels on the border as well as a high-speed LEV train. And I also build hydrogen fuel cells. I'm looking for people to maybe help me test my product out. My name's Dan Frank. I'm on Facebook. You can look up my invention on there. I'm building hydrogen fuel cells from razor blades. I'm recycling the razor blades. They're awesome. And it's a huge answer to a lot of our power problems. This is something that's portable. You're going to be able to take it anywhere and produce your own power. So,
well, I'm all for anybody trying this stuff. I don't support the government picking the winners and choosers, winners and losers, because they're the ones who are picking that. They're the ones who are subsidizing that, and that's my problem. I mean, we see what's going on with Elon Musk and Tesla. I mean, we just had a video that surfaced of a guy who was servicing the Teslas up in Canada somewhere, and he said every one of these things that come in, they're just collecting. All of the Model 3s are collecting mud and dirt, and he goes, I'm typically getting between 10 and 20 pounds of mud. There you can see the video of him right there as he's pulling the stuff out. He says one of them, he got 35 pounds of mud that collected up underneath the Tesla. This is something that's going to cause these things to rust. You talk about electric vehicles. So, I mean, we get into this type of thing when we start picking winners and losers at the federal government instead of allowing the marketplace to do it. We do massive subsidies of everything that Elon Musk does, and we wonder, why Solyndra and Tesla and other companies like that are failing. And Tesla is in a lot of problem right now. This is a fan site that is showing this type of thing. So, yeah, I agree. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for letting us know about that. I think we need to try other types of energy. I'm all for choice. Right. And I'm all for people, if they want to do internal combustion engines, fine. If you want to do hydrogen fuel cells, fine. If you want to do electric batteries, fine. But let the market sort it out. Let us have a choice instead of shoving one choice down our throat by subsidizing it. Let's go to Kirk in Michigan while we're waiting for Gabe Hoffman. Go ahead, Kirk.
Hi, David. Appreciate what you guys do, and good to see you back in the saddle.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
What I want to talk about, and I heard Mike Adams talk about it the other day, and I don't really hear a lot of people talking about it other than that, is this this popular vote, national popular vote bills that are getting passed through. I think they're at about 12 states right now, with a few other states that are
Colorado just signed onto that. I talked about that on my show. Yeah, it's a very dangerous thing. To have direct elections like that instead of the Electoral College. I think it's very foolish for us to throw these things out without understanding why the founders put it in. And I've got a personal experience that I've related every time I talk about the Electoral College. But tell me what you think about it.
Well, it's scary, to be honest with you. And we all know that, where they want to head. They want to make sure that people like us in the red states and, middle America never get to have any votes anymore.
Yep. That's exactly what it'll do.
Yeah. And my main question, and I don't know if you have an answer, is federally from, the Constitution, when we think about that, is there anything that they can do federally to subvert this? Because I don't see how this can even be legal.
Well, I guess they're trying to slip this in maybe in some kind of a loophole, saying that the states have certain controls over how the elections are being conducted. I'm not really sure what they're going to be doing to try to get around the Electoral College. But, yeah, there are a dozen states that have said that they're going to do, they're going to allocate the delegates with an at-large method. But I would just give you my personal experience in the county that I lived in North Carolina. It was predominantly rural. One part of the county, they started putting in residential neighborhoods with high density housing because it was a spillover from an adjacent county that was very liberal. And the first thing these people did, as some of them got elected to the council there, the county government, they changed it from district representation to at-large representation. And once they did that, because they had a concentration of people in that one corner of the county, they got all of the seats in the county. And what they did then was they shut down the property rights of the people who owned farms who had been there for many, many generations. They basically were not allowed to do any development. They put restrictions on what they could do with their land, how they could sell it, and so forth. That is what we're going to see on a national level. You're going to have basically all the national level. The president will be picked by the people who are voting in Chicago and LA and in New York. And it won't just be the people who are voting there. It will be the politicians who are stuffing the ballots, because those big cities with a high concentration of people are notoriously corrupt. And so you're going to have just a few big cities that are going to be picking the president in these national elections. That's really what's going to happen with the if you get rid of the Electoral College. The founders put that in there, and we should ask ourselves what they knew that we don't, because usually they understood politics, they understood human nature, and they understood these types of devices much better than we do. And before we throw any of that stuff out, we ought to do a little bit more research. I think we've got Gabe ready now. Yeah, we do have Gabe ready. Thank you so much, Kirk. We're going to go over to Gabe Hoffman now, who is joining us. Again, Gabe Hoffman is a former hedge fund manager. He made a lot of money at a very early age as the youngest hedge fund manager they had on Wall Street back in 2000. He now has a production company that's produced a movie called An Open Secret, and we've had him on multiple times. It's about sexual abuse in Hollywood, and he is still talking about that. But also, we want to talk about Bob Mueller. You know, we just had come out. Thank you for joining us, Gabe. You know, Gabe, we just had the sentencing of Paul Manafort, and you got the left outraged that he didn't get 24 years in jail. I think that 47 months, 4 years is strict for that. When we come back, well, we're out of time in this segment. When we come back, we're going to talk to Gabe Hoffman. As I was coming in this morning, I hear people all over the political spectrum as to whether or not Paul Manafort got too stringent or too lenient a sentencing from Paul Manafort. But we're going to tell you what Paul Manafort did with a very high-profile pedophile, David Asimov, son of Isaac Asimov. Joining us now is Gabe Hoffman, and we're going to go right to Gabe. Sorry, we had trouble establishing contact. You can find Gabe on Twitter at An Open Secret, also on Facebook. An Open Secret Doc is the name of his page there. We've had the sentencing of Paul Manafort. As I was saying before we went to break, a lot of people say, well, it's way too stringent. Some people said it was way too lenient. And let's talk a little bit about something that's up the kind of along the lines of the documentary that Gabe Hoffman put together, where he was looking at the sex abuse in Hollywood. And that is the high profile. Well, it actually isn't high profile. The mainstream media didn't really cover it. But somebody who is very well connected, the son of Isaac Asimov, and how Bob Mueller treated David Asimov as he was found to have and convicted of child pornography. He had a lot of child pornography on his computers. He had child pornography equipment there, I believe. Gabe, tell us a little bit about David Asimov's case.
Sure. So we're going to talk about Robert Mueller's special deals for multiple pedophiles. Not just David Asimov, but also George Nader and, of course, Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, yeah. It's stories that the mainstream media won't cover. In this case, Robert Mueller was the U.S. District Attorney for San Francisco, and David Asimov, the son of famous author Isaac Asimov, was caught with thousands of videos of child porn. Not only that, he had duplicating machines. It was suspected that he was distributing them to Hollywood elite. The entire case was sealed, And Robert Mueller, you can see his signature right on the documents. He decided to let David Asimov off with 6 months of house arrest for thousands of child porn and distribution machines.
Well, I'm looking at these court documents that you sent us. One of the things that he was appealing was he said, well, I would be sentenced to, normally be sentenced to imprisonment for 30 months, but I want a downward departure. And he got it. I mean, people are saying, well, we ought to have 24 years for Paul Manafort. One of the things that they said was otherwise unblemished record. Well, I've heard all of these pundits talking about Paul Manafort saying, well, he's going to let him off because that's the only thing they caught him doing. It's absolutely amazing to see Bob Mueller and the double standard that we see here, but especially as you're pointing out, multiple cases of pedophiles like Jeffrey Epstein and others getting the white glove treatment, so to speak, I guess we could say, and getting off with this when, they and the mainstream media doesn't ever cover this.
Yeah, and as Alex would say, we have the documents right here. This is not a conspiracy theory. This absolutely happened. And the local police at the time about David Asimov said of these literally thousands of child porn videos that they didn't have the manpower to even go through and catalog them. And of course, we can talk about Jeffrey Epstein, who sex trafficked dozens of young women, underage teen girls, raped dozens of underage teen girls, and Robert Mueller, personally, as head of the FBI, signed off on the plea deal where Jeffrey Epstein got only 13 months in a work release program where he spent 16 hours a day outside unsupervised working and only 8 hours a day in a private cell in Palm Beach County.
And of course, not only giving them light sentences, but completely redacting everything. You look at the court documents, and they're nothing but blacked out pages. I mean, this is like some kind of a top secret national security document. And this is about the exploits of a very elite pedophile, and they treat it as if it's national security. Maybe it is.
And not only were the optics around the deal and the ethics around the deal wrong, we've seen the documents now, the FBI vault, where Jeffrey Epstein was an informant for the FBI. The FBI and the government authorities were after Bear Stearns at the time. Remember, Bear Stearns had that hedge fund which collapsed just as the financial crisis was dawning. It was a big news item. The feds were looking for scalps, as it were. And Jeffrey Epstein, as a billionaire investor, had a small stake in the Bear Stearns hedge funds. So that's what was traded, information on the Bear Stearns hedge funds, for this very light sentencing. However, what was the result? The two Bear Stearns folks, their names were Ralph Cioffi and Matthew Tannen. The government took them to trial a couple of years later, spent millions of dollars, and guess what? They were found not guilty.
Do you think, and of course, we've seen this over and over again. We know that they put people in these positions who have been blackmailed or who are blackmailable. Is there any evidence that the FBI was involved with Jeffrey Epstein so they could get evidence on people to be able to blackmail them in future? I mean, it isn't any secret to anybody. It's a known fact. If you look at Dennis Hastert, for example, that they knew that he was involved in pedophilia as a wrestling coach in high school. They groomed him for Congress, and then they put him in as the Speaker of the House for Republicans longer than any other Speaker of the House that they've had. And so they particularly selected him for that purpose. You think that, certainly I'm suspicious that that's what's going on with the FBI. We know J. Edgar Hoover loved to do that type of thing. Do you have any evidence that that was going on with Bob Mueller and the FBI?
Well, we do know that Jeffrey Epstein had a number of very powerful celebrity and politician sort of clientele for his underage child sex trafficking. What we do know is that Prince Andrew, for one, of the UK royal family, is a known friend of Jeffrey Epstein. And it has been said that Jeffrey Epstein had multiple recording devices installed in rooms at both his island and his Palm Beach home. We don't know what the FBI got, and we don't know what is in them. But there's certainly every possibility of what you're talking about happening in reality.
Do you think that there's any chance that they are going to pry some of this open? They were, throughout the criminal trial, they were able to keep this stuff secret. They were able to suppress it, but now we've had a court decision as there are civil lawsuits that are being pulled against them, and they're saying that we've got one judge that says that the information being held back, being redacted and so forth was a violation of the defendants, or the plaintiffs rather, who were trying to get some justice out of this. And so now it looks like this judge is amenable to opening up some of this information. I mean, what do you think is going to happen with this Jeffrey Epstein case now?
That's right. I think we are going to get the records unsealed. The real question is, will anybody ever be held accountable at the FBI or who was in a position of power, like the local prosecutor at the time, now Labor Secretary Acosta, where it has been shown that that deal was made with Jeffrey Epstein in violation of numerous federal statutes. But Jeffrey Epstein and David Asimov are not the only two pedophiles, convicted pedophiles, where Robert Mueller has made a special deal. Have you heard about George Nader, for example?
No, tell us about George Nader.
So George Nader is the powerful Lebanese-born lobbyist and businessman. He is a twice convicted pedophile. Once was convicted in Virginia and served 6 months for child porn, and once in the Czech Republic served only a year for raping approximately 10 underage boys. Now, this convicted pedophile twice was flown in by Robert Mueller earlier this year as a witness to give a deposition to the grand jury in the case against President Trump. So Robert Mueller is so desperate to get something on Trump that he's willing to use a twice convicted pedophile and somehow trust his word about whatever he has to say regarding various business dealings of Donald Trump. It's simply amazing.
And, of course, we haven't seen any evidence of any wrongdoing. I mean, we've had people who have been, you know, they use this as a means to investigate a man and not a crime. There's never been any evidence with any of these people of conspiracy or corruption involving Russia, which was the original purpose of having this special prosecutor. But it's become apparent that Bob Mueller and his crew are there to investigate President Trump and anybody associated with him, to try to tar him with any kind of implication if they can find any ancillary crimes, or even manufacture some process crimes by charging people with perjury if they make statements that are even immaterial to the investigation.
Right. I mean, just because George Nader met overseas once with Eric Prince, or met with Kushner, or met with Bannon, you know, one time in New York City, that was reason enough for Mueller to call in anybody and everybody. The first thing that you think about is credibility and character in terms of a witness. So a twice convicted pedophile, it's simply remarkable. But of course, Robert Mueller isn't the only person in power who is not enforcing the laws to protect children and is helping pedophiles do their thing.
Yeah, it's been a long-term process. Stay with us. We've got one more segment with Gabe Hoffman. We're going to do it at the top of the hour, and then after that, we're going to have Dr. Nick Begich is going to be taking the fourth hour here on the Alex Jones Show. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking to Gabe Hoffman, and of course, he's produced a documentary, a child abuse documentary that Hollywood does not want you to see. You know, we've had a lot of talk about Michael Jackson and how that was swept under the carpet for a very long time. There's a lot of information in Hollywood, and there's a lot of information in California. As a matter of fact, Gabe, you were talking about off air, you were talking about Kamala Harris and what happened during her tenure there as the California State Attorney General. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, that's right. So for those who haven't seen our film, it's free on Vimeo. There's been over 5 million views. There's a 94% rating on Rotten Tomatoes from professional film critics. Even liberals like the New York Times and Variety gave our film rave reviews, and it's free for you to understand what happens with Hollywood child sex abuse and how to protect your children from sexual predators.
That's very important, and I appreciate you doing that for free, because that shows that you're not just out here trying to make money. You did the documentary, you put it up for free because you want people to understand what these grooming tactics are. You know, that was at least one article that I saw about Michael Jackson. One of the most important things about that was how he operated, and how he operated, even though he's got an extraordinary amount of money, is technically not any different than any other pedophile is going to groom your child. So you need to be aware of what their tactics are. Go ahead.
Right, and the slow grooming process where somebody like a Corey Feldman or Macaulay Culkin might say, hey, Michael Jackson never molested us. Well, sure, Michael Jackson kept a couple of them around, just like any Hollywood powerful predator would, surround themselves with children, but then only pick a couple to molest that might suit their needs or be, you know, the most adaptable. Yeah. So in the case of Kamala Harris, she was Attorney General of the state of California from 2011 to 2017. Now, in 2012, as we show in our film, the Child Protection Act was passed in the state of California. And what that requires is anybody who is working with children in Hollywood, whether they're an agent, a manager, so on and so forth, needs to pass an FBI background check, get fingerprinted, and make sure that they're not a convicted pedophile. Pretty simple stuff, right, David?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, background check. They're all about background checks, right? Go ahead.
Right. So since our film, and we showed a very powerful person in the large Hollywood union, as you might remember, who was not and didn't do a background check, you would think now they've got to get it straight and everybody's got to enforce this law. A recent Deadline investigation showed that out of hundreds of managers, scouts, agents, so on and so forth, not a single one had registered per the law, per this Child Protection Act. So Kamala Harris, in charge of enforcing the Child Protection Act, literally goes ignored, hundreds and hundreds of cases, and you have dozens of convicted pedophiles still running around in Hollywood, managing children, in contact with children, despite what the law tells us.
Wow. She is just such a fraud. You know, when you look at the situation, when you look at the videos, the undercover videos put out by Center for Medical Progress of Planned Parenthood clinics, which appeared to show them negotiating for body parts to traffic in body parts. She went after the Center for Medical Progress because she said they violated the privacy of these people at Planned Parenthood. You know, just like it's all about privacy until they want to snoop into all of your phone calls, your social media, and so forth. It's such hypocrisy that she puts out there. And of course, we've seen this with her bragging about her smoking pot and listening to Snoop Dogg or whatever. People have attacked that on a number of ways, saying, well, timeline doesn't fit unless she's maybe doing it while she's Attorney General. It's absolutely amazing what this woman will say in any given moment to get elected.
And you even saw more recently the film The Predator, a big Hollywood production by Fox. The star Olivia Munn had found out that there was a convicted pedophile in the film. She, got in touch with the studio. She complained his role was cut out.
It is rampant. It's absolutely rampant. Thank you so much for joining us, Gabe Hoffman. Again, it's an open secret, and you can see that for free. You should see it for free, especially if you have any children.
And welcome back to InfoWars. And I'm standing in this fourth hour on Friday, March 8th, 2019. And man, what a last few weeks this has been. I know it's been a little while. Had to juggle my dates around. I was traveling, actually. I was in Thailand and stops in China, Hong Kong. And man, what a difference in things. When you think about Asia, you hear a lot about Asia, but going there and seeing Asia is a little bit different, and I can tell you, Shanghai and Hong Kong airports, unreal, in terms of size. And some of my encounters there, because I just transited airports in China. China is not really my place to go. But I was visiting my business partner and attending a wedding in Thailand, which was pretty interesting. And, the gold culture of Asia, you forget about it when you're not there for a while, but, some background a little bit about Asia, what's going on in the world. And it makes me really focus on this a bit today. When you think about what's happening in the West, whether it be Asia growing on one side, and then you look at the West, Europe, Canada, the United States, and you think about it just in raw terms. Population, the U.S., but 350, 400 million, including Canada, maybe another 100 million. You look at Europe, and you're adding in maybe 400 million more. And these are mature economies. The middle class has reached sort of its optimum levels. Money's more and more concentrated in the top 1% or half of 1%. And now that money is being shifted because what has happened is the creation of institutions with the name democratic, when in fact they're not democratic at all. And I'm speaking of the European Parliament as a case in point. No one is elected to the European Parliament, and yet they consider themselves a democratic body because they all vote. You know, the parliamentarians vote for issues that then regulate the lives of people who never voted for them. And fundamentally, going back to our very beginnings as Americans, we need to recognize that this is where our country started, was government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Governance and the authority to govern springing from us, sovereign souls, sovereign human beings. And this is what Europe has forgotten. So they name institutions where there's nobody elected. They're all appointed. A few now are being elected, I guess, in Great Britain, but they're about out of there, you know. So when you think about this body of people regulating people's lives on a pretty significant basis, and having no authority from the people to do so. This is socialism. This is something else. This is not democracy or the representation of a republic or even the idea of republican democracies or those that spring from people. When I was thinking about China and I was thinking about Asia, it's sort of how their system runs. There's 4 billion with a B, 4 billion people that are going to move into the middle class probably over the next 30 to 40 years. When you think about where Asia is, look at Asia at 4.4 billion, Africa 1.2 billion, and then compared to Europe and North America combined 1.2 billion. So the real energy is Asia, or where that middle class is growing. And let's look at a couple of countries in particular. China and India. China has become the #1 producer of gold in the world. A lot of people don't realize it. I believe that now Russia has become #2, and #3 is South Africa. And you got to remember, these are groups that are part of the BRIC, you know, which is sort of the alternative emerging economic powerhouse. This includes Brazil, India, China, Russia, and South Africa, the big five of that group. Now, what's important to note here is these are also net importers of gold. India, as a case in point, for the last couple of centuries, was buying 25% of all the gold output, and most of that going into private hands. But this is a tradition across Asia. People hold gold and buy gold and bank in gold. Look at this little piece. I picked up this little chain in Thailand when I was there, and it's 96.5% gold. And you pay pretty close to the gold price for it. You don't pay very much for the workmanship of any of the jewelry you buy in these parts of the world, because you're buying the gold, basically, and labor's cheap, so they apply it. But they use it like banking. And everybody, from the poorest of the poor to the richest of the rich, put their money in gold. Certain amount in currency, but those are unstable from their perspectives. And remember, the Chinese invented currency, you know, in terms of paper money, long before the West. And then, of course, Sumeria had the clay tablets for money 6,000 to 7,000 years ago. But again, you know, the trade-off between BAT, which is what was shown in the last image, and the gold in the case is pretty thin. So people hold gold as a way to preserve wealth. And then you think about, again, this emerging middle class of 4 billion people that are basically gold holders. Now, just think about this. China, Russia, and the Pacific created the Asian Pacific Bank to be the counter to the World Bank, right? Which the World Bank is kind of an extortion organization for rich people and globalists, because what they do is they put countries into debt, where they become then indentured servitude citizens who then have their taxes messed around with by the World Bank and other external globalists. So they extract from those countries the tax yield, which is essentially the slavery of that population to accommodate the World Bank. Now there's the Asian Pacific Bank. And what's important about that is a lot of our European allies have joined, and they've joined because they recognize that's where the market actually is. You know, when you think about mature markets like payrolls in Asia are jumping from $100 a month to $500 a month to $1,000 a month to $2,000 or $3,000 a month, which starts to get into what we call middle class and they call upper middle class. Okay, but that's happening at a really rapid rate. Now think of the consumption involved in that. Houses, cars, education, healthcare, different foods, all of it, imports, all the things that then come into play when you have more money to spend. And so when the big globalists look at this, they think of what is the percentage of growth when you go for $100 payrolls to several $1,000 payrolls. There's the growth. In the West, you go from $3,000 or $4,000 payrolls to maybe $3,400, $3,300 payrolls. So the growth is in the East, population is in the East, and we're being gutted in the West by the globalists. We're going to get into this a little bit more today. We're going to talk more about the propaganda wars because we're all being manipulated in a way that is stripping us of our sovereignty. This is Dr. Nick Begich. You're listening to InfoWars. Take a look at Earth Pulse, EARTH, earthpulse.com. We'll be right back after these brief messages. And welcome back to InfoWars on March 8th, 2019. Man, the year is kind of whipping by, and I'm here in Anchorage today, and I've been traveling a bit. I was mentioning last segment my trip to Asia, what it made me really start to think about, contemplate in the context of all of the things that we discuss here at InfoWars. And where I left off in the last segment was sort of why the West is declining and what sort of happened there. What did the globalists do? Well, after 2008, if you think about the big bailouts, most of these companies relocated. They relocated major facilities using that money, essentially, that bailed them out, to move, to leave. We spent $2 trillion out of the Federal Reserve buying up stocks, supporting the stock market, bailing out banks, and then $16 trillion in total out of the Federal Reserve, bolstering foreign banks. Now, the foreign banks were receiving zero interest loans from the Fed. This did not get disclosed until much, much later. And what that money was used for was buying up the dollars as the dollar was plummeting. They then had these zero interest loans from the Fed to jack it back up so foreign banks could keep an equilibrium on the dollar as we went into more or less a free fall. So 16 trillion actually got loaned out by the Federal Reserve, not the 2 trillion that we're told about relative to banks. Now, I want to talk about that in the context of something else, in the whole tax configuration. And why is YouTube, Google, Twitter, Facebook, all of these companies going against free speech and pushing on anyone that's been supportive of a yellow vest or a more to the right agenda? And the reason is these companies, their biggest portion of their wealth, including Starbucks and Amazon, their biggest portion of wealth is in the intellectual property piece that controls all of their affairs. And so what they do is they put that in a country like Ireland, where there's a 5% corporate tax. And so the intellectual property is there, and then they lease it or rent it or do it on a royalty basis with their American subsidiaries. So your net profit, say they make $1 billion. Well, it just so happens the leasing fees for the intellectual property was $1 billion that year. So zero profit in the U.S., all the profit in Ireland, and Ireland has a secretary sitting in a closet answering the phone, right? And this cost center makes $1 billion, pays 5% for Ireland. Ireland doesn't have any infrastructure to manage that little office and phone booth, but that's how it's done. Now, what Trump did in the Tax Reform Act is tax at 15%, at least something, all of this foreign income to repatriate it. So they can pay the Irish tax. They're also paying it here for the first time. Now, you and I as individuals were taxed on our global income forever. In fact, we couldn't just move like corporations could, just move. You don't need anybody's permission, set up a new company and escape the taxes. Trump brought it back. This is why these companies, the billionaires of the 21st century, are so angry. They actually have to pay. These are the socialists thinking everything ought to be free as long as it's free for them, right? And here they are beating up Alex because we bring these kinds of issues to the forefront in an articulated way where you can look it up, find out and confirm the facts for yourself. And it's the counter narrative to the BS. And it's not fertilizer for the brain, ladies and gentlemen. It is what it is. And it is a dangerous thing in the world today, the way it is shaped and shifted. Now, when you think about the trillions spent, let's think of involuntary servitude for a moment. Do you know that the whole next generation that are college students going to school and paying, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 for those degrees, they are not going to be buying houses, and they're not. They're not buying cars, and they're not. They're not buying anything because they're trapped in that debt cycle. And this debt cycle, unlike anything else under the sun except hurting someone, physical harm, and child support, student debt, you never get forgiven. So you're always going to get those loans because you were enslaved forever. It is involuntary servitude because you do not have any escape route from that debt. Now, if the government, instead of spending $2 trillion on the bank bailout, if they had spent $1 trillion paying off all those student loans, as an example, I'm not suggesting we do this necessarily, but think about it. What would have happened? $1 trillion in debt would have gone away for people that actually would have spent the money in the economy here, buying those houses and cars and generating economic activity. It would have been tremendous. What the banks did is buy up their own shares when they were depressed so they could keep the share price up for their shareholders and didn't loan money out to stimulate the economy. That money came from the domestic corporations whose tax rates went from 35% down to 20%, the ones who produce things here and build things here and pay for things here and hire labor here in the United States. And guess what? They got to give raises to people, spend more money on physical plant. And you see it in our booming economy and low unemployment because Donald Trump was correct in taxing foreign corporations. Didn't go far enough because we need to address student loans. We need to address the enslavement of a generation, for goodness sake. They're so busy paying those debts off, they're not contributing to the economy as our economy is being stripped out and moved east. And this is the important thing. An enslaved younger generation will allow this to happen more readily because of the fear, the anxiety of that debt haunting them every day. This is what we've done, and this is what has happened. When you look at the changes in the bankruptcy code, those are up on the boards. The big ones that took place was 1990, where non-dischargeable period extended to 7 years, so you never really got a free break from your debt and a chance to restart. Corporations don't have the same rule. They have a different set of rules. They always win, and the little guy is on the losing end. So the pivot to the east that Obama was talking about was really, and he was a guy that liked to lead from behind. I mean, I never could understand this nonsense. But the pivot to the east is the gutting of America, and that is what we have seen. What Donald Trump is pivot back to the west and stopped at our doorstep for a change. He's got NATO to pay part of their defense bill. He's getting a lot of different play in the United States. But what has happened here is a change that is the most fundamental, biggest change we've seen in our economy in quite some time. Bringing our military defense spending back into the U.S., because we can be anywhere in a few hours. We do not need to have bases in Europe. And the bases we have in Asia include Guam, which is our own territory. We own it. The Marshall Islands, which is our own territory. Going into the Pacific, we have the Virgin Islands reaching out and Puerto Rico reaching out. In Alaska, we can be anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere in 12 hours. We have major military installations here. This is the 21st century. Bring those bases back, spend that money at home, and let Europeans have those bases, but let them pay for them for a change. We've been paying 67%. That's according to Foreign Affairs, the Globalist Journal. 67% and more than that for over 70 years. Donald Trump is correct. It's time to pull that money back into our economy, pivot to the West, bring it back home, and build the country that we all can appreciate, the country that the ideals that this nation was founded on. We're headed into the break. You're listening to Dr. Nick Begich. This is InfoWars. Check out the InfoWars store. That's how this program stays on the air, and we keep people informed. Go to the Info store, purchase items there. You get a 2-for-1, and that is what we need right now. And welcome back. And this is Dr. Nick Begich, and it is March 8, 2019, in this last hour of Friday's broadcast. Going into this section, I'm thinking about sort of setting the stage in the first couple sections, just sort of where things are shifting, and then sort of what systems are being put in place, and what is a really sort of the globalist agenda here. It's several things. First, to dampen the population that's most likely to object the most strenuously, which is our next generation here in the United States and in the West. The second is control of the media, because the media actually is charged with the responsibility of informing the public. It's not really how it works. My dad was a congressman, state senator, U.S. congressman, and he used to say, we don't need freedom of the press, we need freedom from the press. And my mom was reminding me of that recently, and I kind of laugh about it. My father passed away in 1972, and when you go back, that was his view then. You go back to the second inaugural address of Thomas Jefferson, and he was complaining about the press too, and warning about the press. So this is a long-standing issue. It's nothing new. It's just when you lay the press on a technology overlay of today, this makes a huge, huge difference. It's why the contrarian voice, the voices, all voices need to be heard and have access without manipulation. I saw the Joe Rogan and Alex Jones podcast. If any of you have not seen it, you should see it. It was pretty remarkable. But I was looking yesterday, and at one point in the day, it was 9-point-something million. And then I looked at it again an hour later, and it dropped by 900,000. How does almost a million disappear? And it never trended. It was the biggest thing going on for a week. Still is, still growing. They figured out how to dampen it so that the count is not working. So that's more nonsense from these guys who now actually have to pay something in U.S. taxes for the money they have been chiseling away. And these are like the modern carpetbagger, right? I mean, rob the Robin Hoods for the rich. This is like so upside down, so upside down on every single level. And thinking about what do these organizations do? The Twitters, the Facebook, the Googles, all of them. They gather. They're accumulators of data, bits and pieces, little fragments of information about all of us. And with that, they can then create the economic and political social score of the left and start pushing things your way and restricting other things from coming your way as they manipulate the data feed to everyone plugged in, through the normal methods of connecting with the world, through the internet, through news media outlets. And it's not the traditional ones. Hard paper, that you can't change. You can't change the count after the pages are done. You can't pull it out and put it back together when it's issued, but you sure can on the internet. And we see it all the time. The manipulation of history, of events, how they're prioritized, how people view them, and the opinion you're supposed to have about those ideas. These are the fundamental flaws. It is, when you think about information, personal privacy, let's talk about that. This is a doorway of our home, to our castle, if you will, as our founding fathers viewed it. And it was to keep people from coming in and invading our privacy and engaging us in ways that were irrational and unreasonable and without cause. And now we have a digital doorway. It's the doorway into the digital world that holds more information about us than anything we hold in our homes in the modern world. The digital doorway is the doorway that has been kicked in by the leftist Nazis. When you think about socialism as a pattern now for the left, and more so every day, and the ideas, they lose track of history. It was the Democrats, actually, that the Republicans under Abraham Lincoln, it was the Democrats of the South that were supporting slavery as one of their basic platforms back then. Now it's, reparations. Well, they feel guilty for that, I'm sure, because it was Republicans that took a different take on it and approached it quite differently. But again, history is lost in the shuffle. People forget, even income taxes. I mentioned it before on this broadcast. Income taxes were unconstitutional under Supreme Court decision in the late 1800s. 1890s, actually. And it had to be reversed by an amendment to the Constitution. And then later the income tax was brought in, but it was considered involuntary servitude, slavery. That's why the Supreme Court said you couldn't do it. And then you saw it creep from affecting virtually nobody but the top 10% to affecting mostly the bottom 90%, because the top 10 have all the escape hatches for getting out from under taxes. And I've had those discussions. We don't have time to get into that today about how the tax codes favor the rich and how they have since the beginning. You know, Connor and Derry and the team in the production booth today, they're doing a lot of things to bring video and segments into this segment, which I really appreciate. And next time I'm in Austin, I'm thinking sometime in April, we're going to do a long podcast that we're going to get up on InfoWars. You know, and do the 4 or 5 hour full breakdown explanation of what this matrix really looks like, from the controlling of human behavior, you know, in all of the most subtle ways to the most technically sophisticated ways, to way of tracking data and how that plays into the privacy matrix. And then looking at what they did in China in terms of the social scoring. Now, think about that. The same software developments for scoring Chinese, for pushing them in a certain direction, I mean, in a really hard way, because if you don't cooperate there, it's, 15 cents and a bullet in the head. You know, that's sort of the end of the line in China. But everything sort of that is, you don't get passports, you don't get to travel on trains, you can't take planes, you get the crummy job, all these things if you don't conform to their political correctness. And remember, communism is what China is. You know, and democratic republics and communism are political systems. Capitalism is an economic system. Any political system can use capitalism for different purposes, but it always serves the political agenda. Now, for China, it's moving the production into their neighborhood, away from the West, and collapsing the West's ability to manufacture. Think about the population trends going on right now in China, in Russia, for instance. They're declining populations, and people are saying, oh, how terrible, how horrible, who's going to pay for Social Security? Well, you know, that's part of the equation, but the other part is robotics is coming in, and a lot of jobs aren't going to be there. So is China going to be less prepared or more prepared? You know, think about this for a moment. Their populations decline, robotics come up, and they figure out a way to strip out the revenue from robotics, and they will, believe me, they will, because it'll be taxed. Or in China, they just take the company, or they own a chunk of it anyway. So when you think about declining population, these countries, is it really a weakness in the long run, or does that give them strength for where the 21st century is going with AI and robotics, replacing a lot of human function? So we really need to look at this in a broader sense, and you apply that within a communist system, where then they can move the wealth around no matter who produces it and make sure they distribute it across the population for whatever version of socialism they got going. And they have to be laughing right now at the West, because the biggest leaders in the Democratic Party, their new left, are avowed socialists, whether it be Bernie or this nutty woman from New York. You know, I mean, good grief. Go back to dancing. You know, I think Alex got it right. But, you know, this is the shift, too, and I think it's their biggest downfall. This is going to be the poison pill for the Democratic Party. Go ahead. Be socialist. Go ahead. Spread that message and see who resonates with it, and the show is over, because I believe in this republic. I believe in this democratic republic and the people in it. And this is 5 minutes to midnight, and you're listening to the InfoWars, because this is where the truth is broadcast. These messages coming up, these are important for you. They're important for us. Let's keep the truth coming through and ringing through. You know, going into this section, you know, and thinking about all of the things going on right now, I want to go back for just a moment to Joe Rogan and Alex Jones. Okay, and for all of those listeners that are here regularly and have been listening over the last few months, you know, there's been this big fight between these guys that they resolved. And anyone who watched that get resolved, this is extremely important as a model. And I think a lot of people have missed the point. And the point is, this is like the ultimate step forward when two men who have very much public prominence, can come together and forgive each other. What a great example for all of us. As excited as everybody gets, because Alex does, and Joe Rogan certainly does, and as much as, they beat each other up, they came back to a point of recognition that this is not the right approach, that the right approach is what happened the other day with now a broadcast at over 20 million between all the venues. 20 million people plus have seen, and it's still spreading. And what did it do? It gave 4 hours and 40 minutes of conversation that you got to hear the whole spread of ideas hammered out, so there's no details lost in terms of that conversation. And these friends were reconciled. This is the message really that we need more of. It's how we engage one another. How do we connect with each other? On the InfoWars site, there's a broadcast we did. It was one of these little short ones, supposed to be short, turned into 45 minutes. And it's called Breaking the Zombie Trance. And I want to ask listeners to go back and take a look at that on InfoWars. Breaking the Zombie Trance, do a search of it. It's also on my website. There's a link at earthpulse.com right on the front page. And it's 45 minutes, and it's about discourse and how to engage people in a way that you can have that controversy, but you can turn the volume down. And this is what I saw in that podcast. When people start arguing about ideas, okay, it keeps it from getting personal, because ideas are the thing we want to solve, we want to develop, we want to create solutions from. The personal attacks that we get sidetracked on, those take away. They take away from who we are. They take away from our possibilities. Because here's what happened. What happened in the forgiveness of that moment? One of the biggest, in fact, the biggest podcast of Joe Rogan's life happened. And what does that tell you? It tells you people want this information, and they should have it. And more voices need to be courageous enough to take a contrarian voice and allow him the microphone and an opportunity to articulate what it is that they think and why they think it, and present the facts. And if they don't have any facts, just an opinion, that becomes evident and obvious. But think about how that segment ran with Joe and Alex. When Alex says something that they went, that's crazy, that's out of line, and then all of a sudden, the researcher pops up the proof. Here it is, just like the team does here at InfoWars. Right on the screen, boom, there it is. There's the article, there's the info, there's where it came from. So the arguments were no longer arguments that were saying you don't know what you're talking about. They were, here's the facts, let's talk about those. Now, what do we do about those facts? How do we interpret those facts? How do we create change that's in our favor and not in someone else's that's working against our interest? Forgiveness. The highest form of love, in my opinion, is friendship. Friendship. Trusting each other enough to have a debate and an argument and know your friendship can stand the test, or your relationship can stand the test. Because debate based on facts, not emotionally charged debate, although we can't help that. That's part of being human too. But on the facts platform makes it hard. So I would suggest this in the discourse as we all engage it. Turn the volume down just a little bit. Focus on the issues, not the people spreading the nonsense that we find so objectionable. It's so easy to attack them. And look how the media is responding. The media now is so self-defensive because egos have been bruised. So now it's about, bolstering up because, hey, you stomped on me. You kicked me in the place where it hurts. But that isn't what it's about. It's about giving information, finding out what information you're missing or what the other party's missing, and filling in the blanks. And then it's about fighting over solutions that bring America back to the place that we want it to be. And on a value set, I think we're there on so many levels. And the things that are happening right now are meant to separate and to polarize, because this is a tool of villains. It's to keep people from communicating and then regulating their communication and limiting what they see and how it goes. It's the biggest propaganda machine that we have ever seen since Nazi Germany. It really is. And then it was tell the big lie, tell the biggest lie ever. And look at this nut from New York. And you go, you're talking about a $93 trillion budget to accomplish what she's doing. That's unrealistic. That's the fact. 93 trillion is more than the world whole gross product of the world, right? Everything we do in a year, we don't have those kind of resources. Those are not realistic solutions. They're imaginings. They're fantasies. And to convince an uneducated public that those fantasies can come true, this is the dangerous place we're in. And that's why accurate information based on a foundation of facts is extremely important right now. You know, the Trump administration right now should be reporting how much foreign tax money has been collected by these tax-dodging multinational globalists. How much has been collected because of the change in the tax code? Americans need to know. This is a very important data point. They were freeloaders, free riders telling us how to think and what to do and not even paying the price of the ticket to the dance. And that's why they're angry, because they have to pay for a ticket to the dance, and they don't want anybody but their selected few into the party. This is not how it works within this democratic republic. This is not what this country is about, and it's not what InfoWars ever been about. I go back when Alex and I first met, almost 25 years ago. Alex was 20, and in deep, gravelly voice, he always had that. So you always thought, I never met him in person, I'm dealing with someone more or less my age. I'm 60 this year. Alex is 45 this year. But we've been at this for a quarter of a century. And InfoWars, it's always been about information warfare. And my slogan in my company was always changing the way we see the world. Because I'm sick of seeing the propaganda version of the world from what they call the mainstream media, which is the mainstream editorial board, is how I call it, the editorial board for political correctness. Because real news comes from digging in. And I want to say in the last few minutes of the broadcast, everyone that listens here, we get our information from places we resonate with. And there's a thing we can do that makes us very powerful in the public debate. You must gain knowledge of the adversary. This is what Alex does. This is what I do. This is what people who are doing these kind of broadcasts do. We look at what are they publishing? What are they saying? What direction are they looking for? The publications to do it with that are easy for all of you to look at the library. Foreign Affairs. That's the Council of Foreign Relations playbook. You read that, you get a pretty good profile of where the push is going. Take a look at the last 2 years of back issues or 10 years of back issues. You get the whole profile. Just look at what they're publishing. Then look at Technology Review, a great publication on every mainstream magazine rack. Technology Review is MIT's technology trends. It includes AI, robotics, privacy-related technologies, all of it. These are the big trends in biomedicine, all of it. So these two publications alone give you the adversary sort of position play, so you get the facts. Now you can put together your facts that counter these arguments that are being placed. And now you are powerful. Now you have information bullets in your gun. You have something to fire back with instead of just the raw knowledge that the value system is screwed up, that the information is flawed. Have the facts, punch back, send those factual letters based on strong information to congressional delegations. Call them on it. Call them on it. Think about if Alex had asked listeners on that 20 million person broadcast, call the Capitol switchboard and complain about free speech. At least 10,000 would have done it. They would have gotten another call for a week. Start calling Washington. Tell them what you think. Tie up the phone lines. Do it every day. I remember years ago when this was done, and it works. Chuck Harder did it in his broadcast years ago when Ross Perot had a chance. And he was the big voice out there in the media for Ross Perot. This is the voice. InfoWars, the voice for you. Support this network.